On top of this legacy of federal disinvestment, NYCHA, together with New York City, faces profound uncertainty from Washington when it comes to federal funding. And despite the turn away from federal support for public housing over the past 70 years, federal funding today is a critical resource for the authority. In New York, we are proud of our public housing and its resilient and dedicated tenants. Today, the committee is interested in hearing about how NYCHA will respond to the uncertainty from Washington regarding federal funding and what contingencies it has put in place both today and for future plans. We've also interested in hearing about how NYCHA is working with city, state, and partners to address any funding needs through the city's budget process. After NYCHA, we will hear from members of the public, and I would like to remind everyone that who would like to testify today to please fill out the witness slips with the Sergeant of Arms so we can put you on the speakers list. I will now pass it to our committee counsel to swear in NYCHA leadership before turning it over to testimony.
If you could all raise your right hand, please. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions? Thanks. You may proceed, and before you speak, if you could say your name and your title for the record, that would be great. Thank you.
Chair Chris Banks, members of the Committee on Public Housing, and other distinguished members of the City Council, NYCHA residents, community advocates, and members of the public, good morning. I'm Lisa Bova-Hyatt, NYCHA's Chief Executive Officer. I am pleased to be joined by Chief Operating Officer Eva Trimble, Executive Vice President of Finance and Chief Financial Officer Anika Lescott-Martinez, Chief Asset and Capital Management Officer Sean Mavani, and other members of NYCHA leadership team. Thank you for this opportunity to present the authority's adopted budget, which was approved by NYCHA's Board of Directors in November. I would also like to discuss our efforts to transform NYCHA as an organization and improve residents' quality of life. My colleagues and I are laser focused on the work required to keep NYCHA on the stronger, sustainable path that we are currently on so we can better serve the residents now and in the future. We have overcome significant challenges and continue to make progress in critical areas that most impact residents, including mold and lead abatement, and comprehensive renovations through innovative housing preservation programs. At the same time, substantial challenges persist. On top of the escalating impacts of decades of federal disinvestment, our rent arrears remain enormous. Rent arrears have increased fourfold since the year before the pandemic. They currently stand at over $500 million across approximately 67,000 families, which is nearly half of all households. NYCHA is collecting only 63% of the rent owed, including arrears, over a 12-month period. And HUD expects housing authorities to collect 100% of the rent. Our top priority is to keep residents housed. And so we continue to inform residents about the various ways they can get assistance with rent payments, and we continue to work with residents experiencing economic hardship. We are implementing 2 new and critical rental assistance programs, the state's CRA program and the federal Home ARP program, which will provide up to $185 million to cover arrears that resulted from the pandemic. And thanks to our tireless advocacy, in collaboration with our partners, including residents and elected officials, NYCHA has received $161 million in ERAP funding from the state. We have applied $150 million to over 25,000 households to date. Together, these much-needed programs are helping to stabilize rent arrears. Rent payments constitute 1/3 of NYCHA's operating budget and this revenue is essential for maintaining our developments and providing residents with the quality of life they deserve. We are also grappling with the fact that our rapidly aging developments need about $80 billion in major repair work. To address these challenges and considering the limited federal funding available, we are pursuing innovative programs that are bringing top-to-bottom renovations and repairs to a significant portion of our portfolio. I would now like to discuss a few details related to NYCHA's budget. Please keep in mind that NYCHA's budget runs on a calendar year rather than the city's fiscal year. Thanks to the hard work of every department, especially our finance department, we adopted a balanced budget for 2025. This is a significant achievement, and it follows a balanced budget in 2024 despite an initial forecast of a $35 million deficit. However, with the increased needs and continued rent arrears, an annual deficit is expected in the coming years. Federal funding comprises 2/3 of NYCHA's operating revenue. This year, we expect to receive about $1.29 billion in federal operating subsidy. As I mentioned, rent revenue accounts for 1/3 of our operating revenue, and we expect to collect about $1.05 billion in rent revenue this year, including approximately $125 million in home ARP funding. Rent revenue is approximately $110 million less than we should be collecting. Our 2025 budget assumes a proration factor of 97.5% for the operating subsidy, $32 million less than what NYCHA is eligible to receive. We anticipate $287 million in city operating funds for calendar year 2025. We expect to receive about $2.29 billion this year for Section 8 vouchers and the associated administrative fees. It's anticipated that HUD will announce the funding renewal rate by May of 2025. Current proposals range from 88.6% to 97.5% of our calendar year 2024 expenditures. This falls short of the current funding level of 99.5% and could impact the number of households served by the program. The projected expenses for 2025 are approximately $2.1 billion in Section 8 payments to landlords, $1.86 billion in salaries, fringe benefits, and overtime, $410 million in contracts, $585 million in utility payments, and $426 million for expenses such as leases, supplies, vehicles, and equipment. Chief Financial Officer Anika Lescott-Martinez will now provide some additional information about NYCHA's 2025 budget and financial outlook.
Good morning. My name is Anika Lescott-Martinez. I'm the EVP and Chief Financial Officer of NYCHA.
Make sure the red light is on, please.
I'm sorry?
Make sure the red light is on so we can hear you. Thank you.
Can you hear me now? Now?
Here.
Thank you. Good morning. Just going to give you a few short updates on the NYCHA 2025 to 2029 financial plan. Next slide, please. Great. So our rent arrears through February 28, 2025 stands at $545 million. That means that approximately 67,000 households, or around 46% of all NYCHA households, owe some portion of arrears. This is after we successfully advocated for and received $161 million in ERAP funds through the state, with $150 million already being applied to tenant accounts. This data does not yet reflect the COVID rental arrears program or the home ARP program. Data indicates that our cumulative 12-month rent collection rate is relatively steady at 63%. This includes new charges as well as arrears. And this may mean that while some households have not yet been able to completely catch up on their arrears, more households are back to making regular rent payments each month, which demonstrates an important step in the right direction. Next slide, please. So I won't spend too much time here. This is our 2025 sources and uses. Lisa went through it in her testimony. The key pieces here to note is that NYCHA's budget is $5.4 billion. It assumes $1 billion in rent revenue, including $125 million in home ARP funding to support our tenant arrears. And that is a program that we are actively working through. In terms of our uses, $1.86 billion of personal expenditures provides for salary and fringe for 12,051 full-time employees, as well as a $182 million overtime budget. In great news, we do expect a balanced budget at the end of calendar year 2025. Next slide, please. While we have been able to balance our budget in 2025, significant deficits loom in the out years. So NYCHA will implement additional cost-saving measures through the years to mitigate our deficits in 2026 and beyond. We do go through an annual budget process where we adjust all of our estimates for sources and uses, and so we do expect to be able to make meaningful progress towards closing our deficits in the out years. And lastly, on our capital budget, our 5-year capital plan includes $7.8 billion in sources. $6 billion will be invested in minor and major capital repairs at NYCHA properties. In 2025 alone, that means $3.4 billion in funds will become available, of which $3 billion will be invested in major and minor capital repairs at NYCHA properties. We are really grateful for our city support. The city is providing $1.7 billion specifically for the HUD SDNY agreement, so we can continue to make meaningful progress towards our compliance goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Anika. I will now discuss a few details regarding NYCHA's capital investment program. In 2025, about $3 billion is available for capital investments in our properties, including approximately $731 million in expected 2025 federal capital funding, $1.3 billion in city capital funding available for the 2025 city fiscal year, and other federal, state, and city funds allocated from prior year awards. We greatly appreciate the city support, which is helping us transform residents' homes and quality of life. We are also grateful for the state's commitments of over $1 billion for boilers, elevators, and facade improvements. Although this capital funding is only a fraction of the $80 billion needed to fully restore our properties, we are making a difference for residents with the funding we receive. Last year, we expended $1.03 billion, about $86 million per month, on major physical renovations, completing 135 capital projects. More than 650 capital projects are currently underway across the city, and we are targeting $1.1 billion in expenditure and completion of 135 projects this year. We have spent almost $3.2 billion on Sandy recovery work, providing thousands of residents with new roofs, flood-proofed electrical equipment, boilers, backup power generators, and flood protection, along with exterior lights, CCTV cameras, and security systems. In support of our HUD agreement targets, we have replaced 138 boilers and 192 elevators through capital investments. In 2025, construction work is underway at scores of developments to replace an additional 100 boilers and 83 elevators. We have renovated 405 interior trash compactor rooms with new equipment and 21 waste yards with new interior compactors. 30 waste yards are currently in construction. We have replaced 545 roofs through our roof replacement program since 2018, and an additional 275 roof replacements are in progress. We have also completed or advanced a range of smaller projects, from CCTV and lighting to playgrounds and community and senior centers, funded through mayoral, discretionary city council, or borough president allocations. This includes 38 of the city council funded projects that we had to pause 2 years ago due to staffing constraints. Overall, we more than doubled our city capital funds commitments in city fiscal year 2024 to $862 million, or 89% committed. Over the next 5 years, we plan to invest an additional approximately $1.3 billion to update heating systems, $1.1 billion for comprehensive modernization projects, $700 million to repair roofs, $400 million to repair facades, $409 million to replace elevators, $150 million for plumbing upgrades, and $400 million in waste management systems, along with many other critical capital improvements. Our mandate is not only to strategically invest limited funding in residents' homes to improve their quality of life, but also to transform our organization, improving how we operate. Our transformation plan guides our efforts to better serve residents in various ways. For instance, it has enabled us to create smaller property management portfolios that are easier to manage and offer increased accountability and resources. We have also applied the neighborhood model to operations like heat and pest management, enhancing oversight and fostering better coordination with property management. Through our work order reform initiative, work orders are being scheduled more efficiently, and we're making progress in closing them, including skilled trades repairs. Last year, HUD inspection scores regarding our properties improved in every borough. We achieved another important milestone last year, abating lead in more than 10,000 apartments, providing family with the peace of mind they deserve. To date, we have tested more than 100,000 apartments for lead using the city's stricter standard. We completed over 32,000 mold inspections since the beginning of 2023, and mold complaints are down by 23% since then, due to our work to replace roof fans, clean vents in apartments, and install fire dampers. And we continue to significantly reduce both the number and duration of heat and elevator outages. We are not only addressing the issues of the past, but are also strategizing for the future. For instance, our sustainability team is helping to address the climate crisis while enhancing residents' quality of life. The Clean Heat for All Challenge is spurring the production of new energy-efficient heating and cooling systems for apartments. Two manufacturers completed pilots in NYCHA apartments and are currently scaling the initiative for full building installations. The Induction Stove Challenge is similarly catalyzing production of energy-efficient electric induction stoves to explore the possibility of replacing gas stoves in NYCHA apartments. At Polo Grounds Towers, we are in the final stages of construction of the first ever pneumatic waste collection system in a public housing development. Once fully complete, the system will reduce the time staff spends transporting trash, enabling them to focus their efforts elsewhere. We are forging new frameworks for bringing our aging developments the funding they desperately need. Last year, PACT closed on the financing for 8 developments, representing $1.7 billion in comprehensive renovation for nearly 7,600 residents. In October, we announced that the next phase of work is beginning at one especially notable PACT project at Fulton and Elliott Chelsea houses, following years of community engagement there. A total of nearly $7 billion has been invested in NYCHA properties to date, thanks to the PACT program. Overall, 146 NYCHA developments representing nearly 39,000 apartments are in pre-development, are under construction, or have completed construction through the program. We are on track to bring comprehensive repairs and upgrades, along with enhanced property management and social services, to a total of more than 142,000 residents through PACT. The New York City Public Housing Preservation Trust will also dramatically improve the quality of life for residents. The Trust and NYCHA recently released RFPs for major capital renovations and repairs at Bronx River Addition and Nostrand houses, the first two developments whose residents voted to join the Trust. Resident votes have also been held, or soon will be held, at Throgs Neck Addition, Randall Avenue Balcom, Highland Houses, Coney Island Houses, and Coney Island 1, Site 1B. Developed in collaboration with residents, both the Trust and PACT bring developments the more stable Section 8 federal funding, which is worth nearly double what Section 9 apartments receive. These initiatives also ensure that NYCHA developments remain public and that residents maintain their rights and protections, including permanently affordable rent. Our comprehensive modernization program will complete holistic capital improvements instead of simply repairing individual building components. Launched at 4 developments so far, the program is supported by $678 million in our City Capital Action Plan and $212 million from the Gowanus neighborhood rezoning. Design-build teams are on site, initiating renovations at St. Nicholas and Toad Hill houses, and teams have been selected for Gowanus houses and Wyckoff Gardens. NYCHA is confronting serious challenges. Rental arrears are at record levels, while federal funding is not keeping pace with the ever-increasing costs of repairing and maintaining decades-old buildings. Yet we know that NYCHA is a venerable institution serving a vital role in our city, providing decent and affordable homes to hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers, and so it must be strengthened and preserved. That is why we are hard at work to make the best use of limited funding while also implementing creative strategies for generating desperately needed new revenue, such as PACT and the Trust. Thank you for your partnership as we continue to make progress in addressing the challenges and ensuring NYCHA is here to serve the coming generations of New Yorkers. We're happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you for your opening statement. We've been joined by Councilmember Brewer, Salam, Voucher, Brooks Powers by Zoom, and Christy Maldonado. Okay, we're going to get straight into this. First, we're going to thank you again. Good to see you again, and to the executives. It's always a pleasure. We see that the preliminary plan includes very minimal changes with NYCHA's fiscal 2026 budget. And that leads me to my first question. What have been some of your conversations with OMB and the administration about city funding in fiscal year 2026?
Thank you for that question, Councilmember Banks. We are always in conversation.
Can you move the mic closer so I can hear you? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We are always in conversation with OMB and our City Hall partners regarding our programming. The city supports NYCHA quite generously, and this funding relationship is not seen in other PHAs across the country. The actual preliminary budget provides an additional $846 million over 10 years for NYCHA, and we're very grateful for that support.
Were there any new needs that you requested from the administration that were not included in this particular plan?
We continuously speak to them about our programming and our new needs. We actually received $175 million via City of Yes alone, and so again, we found that the city has been very grateful and responsive to us.
And what new needs are you requesting from the city to be included in the executive plan?
We're still under negotiations with the city, so we don't have specific proposals for the executive plan as yet.
When it comes to the city capital funding increases, the city, yes, and fiscal year 2025, the fiscal year 2025 adopted budget. As part of the city's fiscal 2025 adopted budget, the council negotiated for an additional $2 billion in capital funding for affordable housing across fiscal years 2025 and 2026. Included in this package was $700 million for NYCHA, $350 million in each fiscal year. Can you give the committee an update on how the funding will be used in the up and coming fiscal years?
So with regard to the City of Yes funding, we received $175 million in additional capital funds for various projects through fiscal year 26 through 28. It includes repairs for vacant units, critical infrastructure, and environmental hazard mitigation. OMB, NYCHA, and City Hall are all currently in discussions about the exact allocation of these funds, and all parties will have to agree to the allocation before work proceeds. We're happy to provide an update to the council when those allocations have been decided on.
We would definitely appreciate that. The council also negotiated for more funding flow to NYCHA as part of the City Yes for City of Yes / City for All. As a result of the council's advocacy, the administration committed to an additional $200 million in capital funds to support vacant unit readiness and Section 8 repairs. Specifically, the administration committed $175 million to ready vacant units. $75 million of this was committed to fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2026. However, the preliminary capital commitment plan shows no variances in vacant unit readiness in those years. Can you explain when the council can see these funds added?
Sure. So I can't speak to the process of OMB adding the funds, but I can tell you that for the vacant unit readiness program, we have $111 million in city fiscal year 25 and 26. And through the 5-year horizon, we have $193 million. So we're working pretty diligently on that program, and Eva can speak more to that if you'd like.
Yes.
Thank you, Councilmember. I know we've had many conversations here about our vacant unit production, and I'm very happy today to share that in 2024, our production was 24% higher than the previous year. We had just over 4,000 vacant unit move-ins in calendar year 2024, and again, that's 52% higher. So as we've stated in these hearings, we've been laser focused on this program and turning that around. We are doing now approximately 430 turnovers a month.
The state also committed to including $25 million to support these efforts. Was this included in the governor's executive budget? And how confident are you it will be included in the enacted budget?
Yes, we can confirm that there is $25 million in the governor's executive budget.
And was this included? This was included in the governor's executive budget. Well, how confident are you that this will be included in the enacted budget?
We're very confident and hopeful.
Okay. When it comes to rent arrears, the rent obviously is a critical resource of revenue for NYCHA, and the disruption in the rental payments as a result of the COVID pandemic has been a challenge for the authority. Can you update the committee on the progress you're making with rental arrears? What trends are you seeing and what concerns you may have? And is NYCHA's financial plan, financial plan reflects the rental revenue of over $1 billion in 2025, but approximately only like $920 million in 2026. Can you explain the drop, and does it have anything to do with the ERAP funding?
Sure. Thank you so much for that question, Councilmember Banks. So as of February 28, 2025, our rent arrears stood at $545 million. This is after we applied $150 million of the state ERAP funds. On average, the households that are in arrears owe around $8,116, which is a considerable sum for low-income residents. Our rent collection rate is around 63% through February 28, 2025. The percentage is more or less the same or slightly lower than what we've seen in 24 and 23, but what's really important is that we're actually collecting more dollars. So for example, in 2024, at a 65% rate, we collected $993 million. In 23, at a 65% rate, we collected $962 million. So there is some progress that's being made. What's drowning out the collection rate is the arrears balance. It is large, it is difficult for residents to manage. The good news is we do have 2 programs we'll be implementing this year. The first is the COVID rental arrears program through the state. That's around $35 million. We are already submitting a payment file to the state. We've started to receive some funds, and we'll be applying those to tenant accounts. We also have a home art program of 100. It's a total of 150. We conservatively estimate $125 million, and we're working with our HPD, City Hall, and OMB partners on that program. So we expect that after those 2 programs, our rent arrears should drop to around $360 million. Again, large, some certainly, but much progress as to where we are today.
What do you think is the reason why our tenants are not paying rent?
Well, I don't think it's fair to say they're not paying. I think
there are some situations where tenants are not paying rent because of the services.
I think what we've seen at least is that when we look at the monthly collection, our tenants are trying to keep up with the new charges every month, and where they're struggling is on the rent arrears. So if you are, a low-income family, you make $30,000, owing, $8,000 is difficult. And our payment plans, you can only pay up to 40% of your income for 30, as opposed to 30% normally. So it will take a family a considerable number of years to pay down an $8,000 balance. That's why home ARP is important. That's why ERAP is important. That's why COVID rental arrears is important. If we apply those large programs, we hope that it'll bring the arrears down for our tenants, and those monthly payments that they make, they'll be able to catch up again.
Would you agree that there are some residents who are withholding rent because of lack of service?
I do not know of that circumstance, but it could be possible.
Okay. We are going to move on to my colleagues who will have questions, and we're going to start with Councilmember Brewer.
Thank you very much, and thank you, NYCHA, because I think we write you about 500 letters a week. So we appreciate the answers, and we also appreciate Brian Honan, of course. The vacancies, there's 2 kinds of vacancies. There's the apartment vacancies, and then I think there's also commercial vacancies. I know in one development I got 40 vacancies. Can you, in terms of I know you have a capital budget challenge, but how are you addressing the vacancies? Because it's hard for the public to understand we have a housing crisis and there are vacant apartments.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Brewer. As I just mentioned, we have been very focused on our turnover. I saw your number,
but it's not. There's a lot more to go. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's definitely more to go. One of our biggest challenges is that 60% of the vacancies go to transfers. So we also have a significant number of emergency transfers and other transfer needs. So every time we move someone in, another vacant unit opens up. And so that's really why it's hard to see that the overall number of vacants go down because of the level of transfers that we're doing.
I know, but there's still, do you have a number of vacancies, fire, mold, et cetera, ones that need to be restored, renovated? What's that number?
So our total number of vacant units is just over 8,000.
Okay.
That includes about 1,600, almost 1,700 that are off the rent roll temporarily, awaiting some form of modernization or rehab. About 600 that are vacant but already matched to a resident to prepare for move-in. And then about 5,700 is what we call vacant and available. So that's our turnover universe. And that 5,700, we're working on about 430 turnovers a month. But again, with 60% of those going to transfers, it's hard to make headway on the overall number.
Okay. How long does it take when fixed up, renovated, how long does it take to get somebody into an apartment? Is that,
It varies, and we're doing a lot of data work around that,
I
that
get
turnover
complaints
time.
about that, just so you know.
Yeah.
It depends from what to what.
It depends on, you know, residents having to, again, for transfers or new admissions, they still right now have to come up with rental fees, particularly for new admissions, the security deposit first month, and many times they work with HRA to get some of that assistance, and then of course moving costs. And so we match to a unit after the turnover is complete, so they see a renovated apartment, but then they still have to come with the funding available to sign the lease and get their keys, and then do their move-in. And so sometimes there are delays in that side of the process.
Okay. How about commercial vacancies? How many do you have?
So I'm glad that you asked about it. I don't have the commercial vacancy number on me
I've
right
been
now, but
complaining about this for a long time.
I can follow up with, I'm happy to say that we have just started a new working group to focus on some of our commercial spaces. We are looking at both commercial and community spaces to understand what the capital needs are of those spaces, what the potential opportunities are for rental. It's just starting now, so I can't say any further, but we're happy to follow up with you more about that work.
You don't know how many you have?
We do know, I just don't have that number with me today.
Okay. And then the other thing is I want to thank your staff because we just had a meeting on the west side with all of the development, the leaders, NYCHA, agencies. It was excellent. In fact, I would recommend it for every neighborhood. And the doors, DOORS. You break them, you fix them, you break them. So it's about 70 grand per door. So what are we going to do about that? It needs a different approach. What do you suggest?
Two things that we're focusing on with doors right now. The first is to ensure that property management is made aware as soon as a door is broken, because we do have significant CCTV cameras across the portfolio, and we have had some success in actually catching vandalism of the doors, so working with our partners at NYPD and our CCTV team in order to identify who's breaking the door. So that's one thing. So as soon as we have that notice, the better, so that we can deal with it. The second is we are working to improve our training of maintenance workers to be able to fix the doors. So we're hoping to work with just in-house rather than having to rely on vendors more. But that does require retraining our maintenance workers on some of the door technology, and that's something we're hoping to start soon.
My understanding is a lot of the cameras are not focused on the door, though. So in other words, you need a camera that's focused on the door. Is that something that you're looking at?
Yes, we do have significant cameras focused on the lobby doors.
Okay, my understanding is not in the developments that I'm talking about. So that could be looked at because
Absolutely. We're
not
happy to
focused
follow
on
up
the
and get the
doors. They're
list of
focused
developments.
elsewhere. All right, thank you very much.
Next, we'll have Councilmember Marmorato.
Thank you, Chair. So I have to tell you, I have about 5 NYCHA developments in my district in the Northeast Bronx, and you guys are not doing enough. It says it's going to take about $1.8 billion just to repair and bring them up to speed for the capital projects. And, you know, it's devastating to have to go into these NYCHAs. And I go twice a month with my family. We do food pantries, we do events constantly. And just to see what these people are dealing with and how they're suffering is unacceptable, okay? I think that you guys got to do better on that stuff. As far as your fiscal 2026 preliminary budget includes $374 million in city tax levy support, but residents continue to experience slow response times for repairs, security concerns, and deteriorating building conditions. Where is this money going?
That's a question.
So, I'm sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Where is the money going that you're getting from the city tax levy?
Oh, sure. So in terms of the funding for city tax levy, a large portion of that funding goes to collective bargaining payments for union workers, vacant unit readiness program, as well as some smaller programs in support of things like Woodside Senior Center, organics expansion, food and nutrition services. We have a long list that we're happy to share if you'd like specifics on
Absolutely,
programs.
definitely. I'd like to see that. And as far as like the doors, the issue with the doors, I know you had said that you have CCTV video and usually they are told to fix it immediately. That's not true. I have to start calling. I have to go to these developments myself, and I have to take pictures and start sending it to the higher ups just to put it on their radar, because whoever's there to fix it is not doing their job. They're not coming through and helping these people, and it's constant. I had one building, the door was broken 3 times in 1 week. And this is from a resident who doesn't even live and not on the lease of the building, and this person is still in the building. What are you doing to remove? And then another one, we had a shooting. We have somebody subleasing an apartment in another building, okay, who then subleased it to somebody else, and there was a shootout. There are families that live here with children. What are you doing to remove these individuals who are violating all of your agreements, to get rid of them? What are we doing here?
Thank you, council member. I understand how frustrating some of these situations are to our families. So first, let me start with the doors. Unfortunately, right now with the doors, there can be delays in fixing them because we do require vendors to fix many of the magnetic technologies and layered access
But this is people's
components.
safety.
I understand, and
You have to have fast track this. This is.
We are doing our best to make sure that the vendors are responsive and coming in there, but as you said too, we bring them in to repair the doors, and they often get broken again, which is why we're very focused on coordinating our efforts with NYPD, with our CCTV cameras, in order to try to prevent that vandalism, so that the investment we make with our vendors in repairing the doors actually holds. And that's something I'm happy to come to the site with you and walk with you and identify the specific areas that you're talking about, so that we can make sure that we have the right focus on it.
It's going to take a long time. We're going to put together a whole day for that.
I'd be happy to. Regarding the unauthorized occupants, throughout, that is something we are also working very closely with NYPD on. They have a task force that we've been successfully working with to remove, we've removed, I think, over 200 unauthorized occupants, and we've reclaimed those apartments. And so that is also something I'm happy to work with your team on. It's been a very successful partnership. It is a very difficult process. Obviously, we have to make sure we've followed up within the time frame that we can before before we have to go through kind of a housing court type process.
Okay. All right. Now, we have routine complaints about leaks, mold, rodent infestations, and it takes months to be addressed. Months. What's the oversight to hold on the contractors and the maintenance and the staff? What's the accountability here for these delays?
Yes, and I definitely want to get more details from you after this hearing of the specific situations that you're referring to.
But this is like hundreds of apartments that this is constantly happening for. It's not like, oh, I can give you one instance or I could give you one address. We're inundated with complaints to my office. And even when I go there, I have to have women showing me that she has mold growing on the incinerator wall, which is on the other wall of her bedroom. Like, these are things that even though they put a ticket in through NYCHA, they're still calling my office because nothing is getting done about it.
And that's why any examples you can give me, I know that it's widespread, but those examples are helpful for us. Overall, we have increased our productivity across every single trade in the portfolio. 75% of our work orders are getting done with work performed at that time. So there's no more, high instances of sequencing. We're really trying to focus on getting the work done when we show up. We've also been able now to stay on top of our annual demand. We're closing 96% of the work orders that we are getting on a year-over-year basis. So our productivity changes that we've put in place over the last few years are starting to show improvement in every single trade. We are working very hard to ensure that we are getting everything scheduled that we can, so we encourage residents to work with their neighborhood planner to get on the schedule. We know that our schedules are far out, and that has to do with our limited staffing. But once you're on the schedule...
Just cut your staff. Didn't you just cut your staff?
Did I, what?
The staff head count is being cut?
We have not cut our head count on skilled trades. We are focused on having the skilled trades there to do it, but we are unable to grow that head count because of our funding limitations.
You have another minute if you need.
I'll go for the second round.
Okay,
Thank
we'll
you.
come back to the second round. Thank you. We have been joined by Councilmember Aviles, and we'll go to Councilmember Rennan with questions.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about the capital needs I see there's a little over 78 billion in capital needs, is that right? Okay. But the 5-year capital plan is around 7.8 billion. So I guess two questions. If the capital need is 78 billion, 5-year capital plan is barely 8 billion, how are we going to prioritize and triage those needs?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Brennan. So with the current capital plan and since the HUD agreement in 2019, we focus the capital investments on core compliance areas that relate to resident health and life safety. So under the HUD agreement, we have our focus pillars: the heating, elevators, waste and pest management, leaks and mold abatement, and then a few other areas. That's where most of our capital funding is allocated. So of our portfolio today, which is about $6 billion active investment, $2 billion is in heating, over $500 million is in elevators, and some of those statistics that were in the testimony. But basically, we focus most of our investment in the pillar areas. Obviously, in addition to that, we have a number of programs that have been funded by the city that are very critical. So we have a $1.5 billion roofing program. We have over $500 million in facade work and brickwork that's critical as well. And then we obviously have generous contributions from city council members that typically are focused on things like community centers, playgrounds, and other amenities on the campus. It's only about 1% of our budget, but it is a significant number of projects. And so largely our funding goes directly to specific areas we're required to invest in for compliance and for resident health and safety.
So, but that sounds great, but the pillars, it sounds like it covers just about everything. So how do you triage within that bucket?
Sure. So maybe I'll just make two comments. Out of our $78 billion of need, about a third of it is within apartments. So everything from windows to flooring to fixtures, and that's where we're not able to invest because it doesn't directly relate to those compliance areas. So there's a significant portion of need that we're not able to meet today that relate to kind of day-to-day apartment quality of life. Within each area, we have prioritization that's based on that type of asset. So as you would imagine, for something like heating, our prioritization is based on things like the rate of heating outages, work orders that are put in, and then what we typically call the remaining useful life of the asset. So in a heating system, whether it's the boilers or the piping or other types of components, they have a typical life anywhere from 5 years up to 80 years. And as those assets get to the end of their life, they start to have a lot more problems. They fail more frequently. We have to continually repair them. And so when we're prioritizing funding in any area, we look at the key factors that should drive where the systems are in most need of investment, and then we invest on that basis.
And how much of that would be covered by PACT, the PACT?
When we put out the 2023 physical needs assessment, which is where that $78 billion number comes from, at the time we were able to project that about half of that need, 40 billion, would be addressed through our PACT program as well as the Public Housing Preservation Trust. So those tools allow us to address about half of that need as we go. And otherwise we're looking for either extending those strategies or looking for additional capital investment for the remaining need.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have Councilman Voucher.
Thank you so much. You said a short while ago that 200 unauthorized occupants have been removed from NYCHA apartments. By unauthorized occupants, are you referring to individuals who are squatting in empty apartments?
Yeah, so we can clarify the terminology for you between squatter versus unauthorized. Obviously, squatters have rights so after 30 days. And so these are apartments where they're unauthorized occupants that have not yet reached 30 days and squatting. So it's slightly technical. We can certainly send you the breakdown of the work that we're doing with NYPD.
So an unauthorized occupant is someone who is living in a vacant apartment for less than 30 days.
I would just be careful. Thank you for the question. I want to just make sure that we're using the terminology carefully. So I think it's best for us to speak to the NYPD and get back to you, because I think there are terminology that's used differently by the NYPD than we do, and so I just don't want to misstate anything.
Yeah, putting the terminology aside, there are people who have occupied empty NYCHA apartments, and they are now there. They're not leaseholders. How many of those exist throughout the NYCHA portfolio? How many units are occupied from folks who just moved in without permission?
I don't have the total number of squatters across the portfolio. I don't know if that's something we are tracking comprehensively, so I don't think we have that full number.
200, though, have been removed to date. Over what period of time?
I'd say over the past year or so, with our work with the NYPD task force on this.
And though you might not have the exact number handy, are we talking about thousands of units? Are we talking about hundreds? Because 200 were removed.
I really couldn't say.
So it could be a lot more than 200 that are occupied by it. And you talked about a concerted effort. What was the name of that effort to remove the unauthorized occupants?
So the NYPD has a task force. It's the Violence Prevention Task Force, which is a strange name. I think it's really anti-violence prevention, but it's called the Violence Prevention Coordinator. It was Detective Barron. He just recently retired. We were working closely with his team to coordinate reclamation of our apartments.
And once someone is there for over 30 days, it's no longer dealt with in that way. They now have rights to remain there.
Yeah.
I can tell you that currently, our active holdover licensee cases, which is, I believe, what you're referring to, we currently have 1,448 active cases in landlord-tenant court.
Got it. So there's 1,448 instances of when someone has moved into an empty unit, and
they're holdover licensees.
Yeah, and those are in landlord-tenant court to get
Correct.
figured out that way. In 2019, NYCHA collected 88% of the rent. 2020, it was 81. 2021, it was 71% of the rent. 22, 64, and then it was 64 again, and then last year it was 65%. NYCHA is anticipating around $185 million in additional funding to help address this rent arrears problem. Correct. Which is a big problem because it's a third of your operating budget comes from rent. After that $185 million is spent to address rent arrears, what do you anticipate the rent arrears rate to be? What percentage of the rent will NYCHA be collecting in 2026?
I could not give a percentage of the rent that we anticipate to be collected. I would say that at that point, we would have a balance of $360 million in rent arrears still owed. And so we expect that the rent arrears rate would increase, but I could not tell you by what figure. It really does depend on tenant behavior.
One more question, Chair. I apologize.
You may.
So once that $185 million is spent to address the rent arrears, what's the plan beyond that? What additional funding is coming? Where do we go from there?
Sure. So we don't know of, at this point, any additional rental assistance programs beyond that funding. And so we would continue to do our normal tenant workouts and enforcement. So we would certainly work with our tenants to get them on payment plans, encourage folks to pay the rent, do one-shot deals with HRA, and do the sort of enforcement and collection work hand in hand with our tenants at the property level. So there are no other, to answer the question very clearly, there are no other rent assistance programs beyond those that we are aware of at this time.
And what size check would you need right now to cover all the rent arrears out there?
545 million.
So we've got to get you that delta there between the 185 and the 545, you said?
So you'd have to get us 360 million.
Okay. This is critical that we do this because it's when people have these rent arrears on their backs, it's hard to get them to up to date on their month-to-month payments.
Councilmember,
correct.
yeah, that's exactly right. When you think about a family, and our CFO mentioned this earlier, to owe $6,000 when your rent is $350, although we are so incredibly grateful that we were able to provide rental assistance to our tenants, it came 2 years into the pandemic. So we have residents really through no fault of their own. So many of them want to pay rent, but it's very, very difficult for them to catch up. And some sign payment agreements, but as we mentioned, we can only go up to 40% of a tenant's income. And so that pushes out their ability to become non-delinquent years. And so it's really a struggle. And I think you're absolutely right that there are so many residents that want to pay their rent and are staying current, but the significant amount of arrears, it's going to take them, 5 to 10 years to catch up.
And I just want to correct one thing on Lisa's behalf. The average rent arrears owed per household is $8,116.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Voucher. We have Councilmember Aviles.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you to the NYCHA folks. I'm so sorry if I ask a question that you've been through already. I came in a little late. But I'm looking at the adopted capital plan chart in your testimony on page 5. And I'm really struck by the 2026 column that says state capital sources and a big 0. Why is that, and what are we asking the state? What level of funding are we asking the state to commit to NYCHA?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Councilmember Vilas. We are asking the state for $500 million of capital funding in support of our rehabilitation of our properties. We would welcome any advocacy from our city council members in support of that ask.
And I guess that is a slightly decreased ask from what the prior 2025 column shows.
So the prior year includes a rollover of any funding that wasn't spent previously.
Is there a potential for rollover from 2025 into 2026?
It's certainly possible. We continue to work to spend on all of our capital funds. As you know, capital projects take a number of years to complete. So it's certainly possible that some of that money could roll over, but we really do believe that an additional $500 million from the state could help us to make meaningful progress.
Yes, the state 100% should be actually contributing a significant amount to their authority. In terms of in terms of vacant units, my understanding is that we are now hovering around an 8,000 number of vacant units across, which gives me a heart attack because the numbers are increasing when it should be decreasing, given the thrust and the funding to get them online. So what is happening?
Thank you, Council Member. So yes, your numbers are correct. We are happy to report that in 2024, we turned over just over 4,000 units, which is a 52% increase from the previous year. So as we've said in our multiple conversations here, this is a high priority for us and something we've been very focused on improving our production of. We turn over about 430 units a month. However, 60% of the move-ins are transfers due to emergency transfers, other needs, reasonable accommodations. So when 60% of the move-ins every month are a transfer, it just creates another vacant unit. So it's very hard to make progress on the overall number, but I actually think the overall number is less important than our actual productivity here. So the fact that we've increased production by 52%, it's something we're continuing to look at and hoping to increase further. But 430 units a month is the highest number we've had in the past few years. And I wanna reiterate that these are lead-free and asbestos-safe apartments. So this is a tremendous change for us, and I think a really important change for public housing, that these are units every month coming online free of environmental hazards.
And could you don't have to do this right now, but I'd like to request the office provide me with information on Red Hook houses, the number of vacant units, and kind of the situation with the houses there.
Absolutely. I will say Red Hook is still recovering. We had quite a number of vacant units that we were holding in anticipation of the comprehensive modernization at Gowanus and Wyckoff. And so in order to facilitate relocations and keep families in their neighborhoods, we were holding units at Red Hook in anticipation of that. We since released a lot of units because the relocation plans have changed for Gowanus and Wyckoff. And so we're now working on turning those over.
Yeah, and Red Hook residents were being sent to East New York, which is obscene. Right, when we have vacant units in Red Hook, we're holding them for another development, Gowanus, which is our neighbor, but then when you got Red Hook residents being sent to East New York, it doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm glad to hear that those units are going to be turned over. We can follow up more specifically around that. In terms of, I hear you on the one-to-one shift, so the overall numbers don't match, but even 8,000 units in a housing crisis, we want you to continue that productivity. That's what we're investing in, so we're glad to hear that there is progress, even though the numbers don't feel that way. We'll continue to certainly push on that. In terms of, we've been, Chair, I'm sorry, just one more
permitted,
question.
yes, to wrap up.
In terms of, we understand that, or can you tell me more about how long it is taking for folks to process vouchers to get a unit in NYCHA? We understand that there is a very slow slog around getting folks who are having vouchers to get units.
Thank you for that question. I think it's less of an issue with them getting vouchers, but finding apartments. As you know, we have a incredibly low vacancy rate, and we have vendors working with our voucher holders to try to help them find apartments, but I think that's really where the rub is.
Okay, so how do you manage? I know you have transfers and emergency transfers. Obviously, that should be getting priority, and new folks. How do you triage amongst those competing populations?
That is a great question that I do not have the answer to, and I don't want to misspeak. So that's something that we can get back to you on.
Okay, happy to follow up. And then I guess lastly, thank you for. I think, Sean, you sent information around kind of capital updates, and I would like to have a sidebar conversation with you to get more clarity. It's very generic, and I don't understand what it means, like practically in terms of the development, so I'll be in touch with you around that.
Of course, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, we've also been joined by Councilmember Mealy, and Councilmember Mealy, you have some questions?
Thank you, Chair. I have one question. With your 5-year plan, how can you justify having no property emergencies? Could someone explain that to me? Because a senior fell out, and the fire department came and broke down her door, got inside, and do you know how long her door just was fixed after I found out? So y'all saying now, any NYCHA development will not have emergency services?
No, ma'am. That number is just an estimate. We do it year over year to
But
figure.
it's going down to zero.
Yes, but any of the funding, so I'll take a step back and say that any of the funding that we have for our capital plan could be reallocated at any moment to address a property emergency. So we address all property emergencies in a timely manner. For
So
example.
why would you put this on your capital plan? That's giving us to say that you're just not gonna have it, or you now gonna find money whenever it arises. But that may be too late.
Yeah, Council Member Mealy, it's a
I
great.
already see how long it takes you just to fix a door. Do you know people was coming into her house, stealing her food, her chair? So tell me.
Sure, so maybe I can help clarify. There are allocations and budgets for each property, which can be used for emergencies. There's also allocations on the operating budget side, and then there are allocations on the capital budget side in multiple places. And so that line you're seeing in the budget was one of those contingency budgets we hold to deal with larger emergencies. Within
What
the,
kind of emergencies?
or larger emergencies that may
Larger
arise.
like what?
What's a good example? Yeah, like a water main break, if we find a gas outage and it requires a riser replacement, if we find a major unusual roof issue that's structural and is putting residents on the top floor at risk, those type of things will require a larger one-time allocation in the millions of dollars rather than a smaller emergency situation. So it's important, I think, for us to clarify that our emergency services team and all the work that they do and the emergencies we respond to are fully funded on the operating side to the extent we can keep them funded, just like previous years. And even on the capital budget side, this is not the only line item that we hold to deal with those type of emergencies. So for example, in my area, we maintain a facade emergency team when there's any brickwork issues and we have to mobilize. That is a separate budget line item which is budgeted. And so I just want to clarify that line being zero does not mean that we're not holding various funds to ensure we can deal with any contingencies that come up at the properties.
It's like a miscellaneous budget item?
It's an additional contingency item that we hold, right, explicitly in the capital budget, but there's a number of places we have that on capital and operating.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Mealy. We will now proceed with some more questions. This is actually from Councilmember Selvina Brooks. And this is pertaining to a Far Rockaway Trauma Center. Last year, the mayor and his administration agreed to support the efforts to build a trauma center in the Rockaway Peninsula. As part of this agreement, the administration allocated $25 million in the previous fiscal year and agreed to transfer over the NYCHA property to the city as the site of the trauma center. We are currently working to secure $300,000 in discretionary funding to pay for the NYCHA fees associated with the land transfer process. NYCHA remains committed, does NYCHA remain committed to the land transfer process the mayor committed to?
Yes. And as we've spoken about, we need a plan that includes both funding and a provider before we can start the Section 18 process, because we do need authorization from HUD to transfer the property.
Given the mayor's commitment to this transfer, what further steps are needed to move this process forward?
Funding and a provider.
The provider was not part of the plan?
Pardon?
Was the provider not part of the plan?
It's my understanding that there's no provider at the moment, but that might have changed. But we need both funding and a provider in order to start the process with HUD.
So there was no provider that was part of the plan?
It's my understanding that there was not. No.
Okay. What is the expected timeline, and by when does NYCHA expect to have this land transferred to the city?
So that really is dependent upon making sure that the funding is in place and that there is a provider for the trauma center.
But that was never a stipulation.
That is the requirement for HUD, the Section 18 process.
Do we have that in writing?
We have spoken at length with the council member about it. We are also very excited about this program.
Can you get that to us in writing?
Sure, we've already provided it in writing, haven't we?
Because
we can provide it again.
Right.
But there are certain steps that are required by HUD, not by NYCHA, in order to facilitate this. We've provided it, but we will provide it again.
Well, I don't believe that's a requirement, but if you can get that to us in writing, we'll greatly appreciate it. They've been very unresponsive.
Who is they?
The authority.
Who?
The authority has been very unresponsive as far as the information that is given, and we are still waiting to make sure to find out if this is a requirement or not. Again, we just want to put pressure on the authority to get us the information that's needed to make sure to find out to make sure that this is a requirement. And again, we just want to stress the fact that early on this was not a stipulation in the land transfer.
Councilmember, I can speak to this. I've met with Councilmember Brooks Power several times and her staff, including staff at HHC.
Sorry, can I quickly interrupt you to administer
Yep.
the oath? If you could raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
And if you could state your name and title, please. Thank you.
My name is Brian Honan. I'm the Executive Vice President of NYCHA's Intergovernmental Department. So, Councilmember, I've met with Councilmember Brooks Parrows, her staff, and HHC several times on this matter. After the first time we met with CEO Bova Hyatt, I did send them the rules on Section 18 dispositions. In this case, we'd be giving the land at well below market rate, in fact, zero. We'd have to justify that to HUD. And the justification would be that it would serve a community benefit. Now, all of us believe that a trauma center, especially on the Rockaway Peninsula, would certainly serve a community benefit. However, HUD will ask us, okay, what is the plan in place? Where's the funding? And who is the provider? Right now, we have an idea, but not a plan. We need more of a solid plan in order to move forward. I'm confident that with the council member's leadership, that she could put together a plan that will get us there, but we're not there now.
Well, during the one of the first meetings that was held with the DM, it was confirmed that the provider could come later. Is that still?
That is not the case, no. So HUD would not approve, and I've never seen HUD approve any Section 18 disposition without a partner in place and without funding in place.
So is that a stipulation? Is that part of the stipulation?
It is a requirement, yes.
Okay. Well, Brian, it's amazing that now we're getting this information when there was multiple emails that were sent to you and you were unresponsive to it.
I was not unresponsive. I sent, and I can, council member, if you want, I could forward them to you. I sent the rules, in fact, probably hours after we met with the CEO and the council member. I literally took them from HUD's website, copied and pasted them, and forwarded them to you. And council member, I can forward them to you as well.
All right. We're going to move on. When it comes down to the vacancy rate unit turnover, can NYCHA provide the current vacancy rate for Clarington Manor, Hamel Houses, Ocean Bay Apartments, and Beach 41 Street Houses and Redfern Houses, and explain how NYCHA plans to reduce these vacancies under the current budget?
Yes, council member, we can send you the vacancies for the developments that you mentioned in your district. And as I mentioned, we are doing 430 turnovers a month and working very hard to increase our production.
Okay, well, how much funding has NYCHA allocated to speed up the turnover times for vacant units in each of these 5 developments, and what specific actions are being funded to address lengthy turnover delays?
So the vacancy budget is not broken down by development. It's funding we receive to support all of our efforts. So we receive capital funding from the city.
Wait a minute. So it's not broken down per development. It's just.
It's not broken down per development. It's for all of our turnovers. The vacant unit readiness program includes capital funding for the asbestos removal component.
There's no plan for each development. I mean, each development has its own vacancies.
Internal targets
am I
where
correct?
we ask our developments to turn over. We're getting 430 a month. It's about on average 100 units per borough per month. Queens, Staten Island are combined into a borough. So we're trying to push that further every month. And so most of that work is done through overtime by our skilled trade staff, so as not to compete with repairs in occupied apartments. And it's supported as well by the vacant unit readiness program capital funding, which supports the asbestos removal in our apartments.
We need to establish order. Thank you. Yes, you may continue. Did you finish answering the question?
Yes.
Okay. Are there specific targets and performance metrics outlined in the budget cycle aimed at reducing vacancy durations across these 5 developments? And if so, what are these targets?
It's not set forth in the budget, and I think it's also important to remember that NYCHA is supporting the funding of this turnover within our own operating budget. So the city's contribution is just a portion of the overall cost for these turnovers.
And when I switch over to a repairs and maintenance backlog, what steps are included in the current budget to address the backlog of maintenance requests at the developments within the 31st district?
Thank you, Councilmember. So right now, our budget supports our existing staff of skilled trades that we are working with. As I mentioned, we have greatly improved our productivity across all of our areas. I understand that there's still very many repairs waiting to be done, but we've been focused
lots of
on.
repairs
Yes,
still need to
we
be
understand
done.
that it's still long time to get to repairs, but we have been working very hard to align our productivity and then create improvements so that we are getting to things faster and that we are getting to repairs done with work performed so that the job is getting done quicker. So as I said, we have 75% of our appointments are done, our work orders are done with work done, which means they're not getting sequenced further to other repairs and other trades, and we're able to finish the job there. For skilled trades, we're trying to stay on top of annual demand. We're closing 96% of the work orders that are open within a given year, which means
Is that quality work or is
yeah,
this
so we
patchwork?
have our quality assurance team, which was set up as part of the HUD agreement. One of 3 oversight teams does sample and review all of our work areas, and so they go out, they review work performed. If anyone has an issue with work quality,
I don't mean
they
to
can
cut
submit
you
a
off, but it's amazing. We hear and we see it on paper as to what NYCHA is doing, and we talk about quality insurance, but it doesn't trickle down to the developments. One particular development, Cypress Houses, just had a meeting with the Tenant Association where the manager and the superintendent basically said there's not enough resources to fix the repairs in the development. And not only that, but then you have a high staff turnover rate where you have a superintendent that comes in and when you ask him about past tickets that were put in, he has no clue. He comes in and he starts just from where he starts. How is that providing a quality service to the residents of NYCHA?
So I think it's important to understand that a lot of the repairs that our residents are facing are really a reflection of the capital need that we've been discussing here. $78 billion of capital need means that
These are maintenance. These are maintenance issues,
yes, but
ma'am.
maintenance
These are maintenance
is just
issues.
the
Let's be clear. These are maintenance
the repetitive
issues.
nature of the capital need. So we'll come and we'll fix a leak, but because these are the original pipes, we will be back again most likely to fix that leak. And so that is something we are trying to stay on top of.
What about a paint job? What about, I know resident, like she's been waiting 7 years for towels. These are things that shouldn't be. And I know some developments, we get caught up in, obviously, the grander scheme of things of the budget, but we have a lot of developments that are falling behind. And this is completely because of the incompetence of NYCHA. There has not been a serious commitment to deal with the repair issues. So when you talk about quality assurance and the fact that, you have all these things in place, come and speak to the residents. And I've invited you out, CEO Bova, to come and do a walkthrough to Cypress Houses and through the developments in my district, and we have yet to see you come.
So Brian Honan will gladly set it up. I go to many developments, but respectfully, this has absolutely nothing to do with what you said, your words, not mine, incompetence of NYCHA staff. We have 12,000 very dedicated staff members. What we don't have is funding. And what we haven't had for the past 90 years is sufficient funding. And this is a federal issue.
We agree that there are issues with funding. We agree that there are issues with funding. There are major maintenance issues, things that could have been dealt with that has nothing to do with funding.
They have everything to do with funding.
It's just the lack of NYCHA's commitment to really deal with the repair issues.
I'm sorry,
Someone
but that's
getting a paint
not
job. Listen.
Not true. I'm sorry, but all of these things lead back to a lack of funding. And you know what? To CEO Trimble.
How long have you been the CEO of NYCHA?
Since 2020. I was appointed interim in 2022. I've been at NYCHA for 5 years. I was a general counsel before I became the CEO. And I will tell you, you will never meet a more dedicated group of people who are interested in making sure that our residents have decent, safe, and sanitary housing. But when you are trying to balance a budget, and you saw the budget in the out years, we have a $200 million deficit. Maintenance is tied to capital repairs.
So, CEO Bova, would you agree that when a ticket is closed out, and the resident is home waiting for the repair person to come, and the person never comes and the ticket is closed out, that has something to do with funding?
Okay. Well, as Ms. Trimble spoke to about earlier, we're going to talk about...
Could you answer that question?
Repeat the question, I'm sorry.
If a resident has a ticket for a repair, and the resident is home waiting for that repair person to come and take care of the repair, and the repair person doesn't come, and then the ticket ends up being closed out, does that have to be? Does it have to deal with a funding issue?
You know what? It could actually deal with a funding issue, because that maintenance worker could be stuck at a different apartment finishing a repair there. No work ticket should ever be closed if the work hasn't been done. And as our COO stated earlier, the percentage of work tickets that are closed without work being done has dropped absolutely dramatic. I think it's
Lisa,
8%.
I disagree with you. That we're not dealing with reality. You throw these numbers out and this data, and it doesn't match what's going on the ground in the developments. And that to me is the scary part, because you defend this. It's a frustration that's here. And I think we need a commitment to the resident, a real commitment to the residents of NYCHA, and we're not getting that.
We share your frustration, but I can assure you that a lot of the frustration that tenants are feeling, that our own workers are feeling, is that there is not enough money for us to handle all of the needs of our 173,000 apartments across 5 boroughs.
Well, I mean, listen, had NYCHA done the proper maintenance over the years, we wouldn't be in this situation. And that's what you fail to accept and understand.
Respectfully,
I get that the ship is burning now, but we could have been doing things, putting things in place to avoid this. And that's where we're at right now.
So, Councilmember Banks, I think it's important just to add a little bit of color to what Lisa's saying in terms of the numbers. So in terms of federal underfunding, NYCHA has been underfunded by over $500 million over the last 10 years in operating. So that means that over the last 10 years, we were missing $500 million in addition to the rent arrears. I think it's also important to note that in some years, it could have been in the $50 to $100 million range. So I think certainly what we are trying to do is more with less. There's a lot more work to be done. We are all very much committed to this work, and we need support from our various levels of government, particularly the federal government and so forth, in order to get the resources that we need for our tenants. And that's the key.
Listen, I hear you. I think there's a commitment from all my colleagues to advocate for more funding for NYCHA, but we do have to accept the fact that there is the ship is burning now. And there are things that NYCHA can do to deal with some of these issues on the maintenance side and the repair side. And it seems like NYCHA is constantly leaning on, yeah, we don't have the funding, but there is a budget that exists right now that NYCHA operates with. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Right. So but some of these issues are going back years and years of just NYCHA not dealing with them.
And NYCHA not being historically funded. So it has happened over years, and it's no fault of the city, no fault of the state, but historically we have been underfunded by our federal government partners. And so we have tried to do the best we can with the funding that we have, but $555 million of underfunding just in 10 years alone is significant for us. So we are doing the best we can with that $5.4 billion budget. We commit to you and to our residents to continue to work as hard as we can. And if you have specific concerns in certain developments, we are happy to give you more details.
We hear that all the time. If you have specific concerns, yeah. We've heard that multiple times. Sometimes it's systemic, it's robust, and that's the reason why we're addressing it from that standpoint. When it comes to RAD-PAC, which is also a program implemented by the NYCHA, the core component of NYCHA's transformation plan is the RAD-PAC. Through RAD-PAC, NYCHA will utilize federally funded project-based Section 8 vouchers to convert 62,000 apartments to private management. RAD/PAC is important because NYCHA can unlock federal funding for its housing that has been systematically dismantled by the federal government for decades. How do you think the changes with the federal administration will impact federal funding for RAD-PAC?
Want to do RAD-PAC, Brian?
Do you want to do federal funding? I can do federal.
Yeah, if you want to start. So, sure. So I'll certainly have Brian add. I think it's important to note that NYCHA continues to monitor our proposed federal funding and regulations, and we work closely with our partners. As many people know, there was a federal funding freeze, which has created a lot of uncertainty in the process. So we are advocating. We're actually going to DC next week to talk to our partners on the Hill to make sure that we continue to get the funding we deserve for our NYCHA residents to improve the conditions that you're mentioning. And I'll ask Brian to provide some more details specifically on RAD-PACT.
Sure. So, Councilmember, I think that one of the few things that this current administration is committed to, and the administration before, is RAD as a tool to find investment for public housing. All things that we're hearing from Washington is that Section 8 funding remains much more secure than Section 9 funding. And that has been true for quite some time now. And right now, RAD is the only tool that HUD offers in order to bring real investment into developments.
With the RAD PAC, with the 62,000 units that have been converted to RAD, is there any savings for the development? I mean, for NYCHA, the authority? Because obviously we've had multiple units converted, multiple developments converted. What does that look like as far as repairs now, or the budget for repairs for the other developments?
Sure. So, yep, I'll let Sean talk about it, but can I say, short term, there is some savings, but long term, so our funding from on the Section 9 side is based on the number of units we have. When we convert, we have fewer units, and that does reflect our funding. So, short term, yes, some savings. Long term, we actually lose some funding from Washington for the Section 9 portfolio. But we have a smaller portfolio.
So do you have any, with the 62,000 units that have been converted, can you give us a dollar amount as to savings for NYCHA over the last 4 or 5 years?
So just to add some color to what Brian was mentioning, when you convert a unit, you step down the subsidy and you actually lose public housing operating subsidy because that unit now belongs in the Section 8 portfolio. What we've done over the past 5 years is reinvest in the HUD agreement and pillar areas. So you've seen an increase in NYCHA staff, you've seen an increase in skilled trades and so forth. So what we've done actually is add more resources. So you have that, let's say 50 people that worked at that development, those 50 people reallocated to other properties in the portfolio to fill vacancies and provide that support. And so there are no sort of large, big picture savings. As Brian mentioned, the budget over time is actually decreasing because you no longer get the funding for those units.
So you've had a decrease in your budget because of the developments converted? Those units converted.
Money over time, it steps down, and you lose money for those units because you're funded based on the units that you have. When a property converts, HUD steps down the funding over 2 years. They give you a small sort of temporary increment, and that is what we use to sort of reallocate staff and provide additional resources to the developments that remain.
So maybe I can add, so the operating revenue decreases because the units have moved out of the Section 9 portfolio. The operating expense also disappears along with that, right? Because NYCHA doesn't have to maintain the property anymore. And then there's a significant benefit on the capital side. So 62,000 units is the overall goal for the PACT program. For the units that have converted to date, it's an equivalent to about a $6.5 billion capital investment, right? That's come off of our physical needs by those properties converting. So there's both the operating budget impacts in the budget and the cost side, and then there's also a significant amount of liability that's moved off of our books and have been funded and renovated through the PACT program.
So it's just an asset that's then to be removed off of the books of NYCHA, basically. Well, that particular development is then just removed off.
It's the capital repair cost.
So the capital repair cost goes away for that
the
particular
capital repair cost zeroes out. The operating budget revenue and cost zero out, and then from a number of the PACT deals, we do continue to get revenue from the property over time through the partnership with the PACT partner.
Okay. How do you think that the changes with the federal administration will impact federal funding for RAD-PAC, and what kind of indicators are you seeing?
I think that might be the question that Mr. Honan just answered around the federal impacts.
What indicators are you seeing?
Indicators.
So we don't have a federal budget yet. As you know, the federal government is still trying to avoid a shutdown on March 14th. So we're continuing to monitor. But as Brian mentioned, we do and have heard that there is an increased sort of emphasis on the Section 8 portfolio and that they are generally supportive of RAD-PACT and losing Section 9 units and putting more units in Section 8. But there is no budget yet, and so we're happy to give the council an update once that happens.
Okay. Prior to the Trump administration, NYCHA's ability to use PACT more broadly was limited by a cap set by Congress. In addition, NYCHA would need approval from HUD. How realistic do you think an expansion of the RAD PACT program is under this Congress?
We think it is. We think it is possible. They seem to be supportive of the RAD PACT program, and so we'll continue to advocate. But we think it's possible.
Okay. We're going to move to our second round of questions, and we're going to start. Actually, we were joined by Councilmember Salamanca, and first round of questions we'll start with Councilmember Salamanca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Just to get going here, senior centers. I have a few NYCHA. I have a few senior centers that are in NYCHA buildings. One of them being Melrose My Haven Senior Center, and it seems that the senior center is constant. They have issues with their ceiling. A few years back during COVID, there was repairs that were done to the senior center. I know that the building itself is a senior building. Repairs were done. Now we're back to the same thing. The ceiling is gone. With flooding. Can you explain to me what repairs were actually done 4 years ago that now we're back to, the ceiling being flooded over again?
So I don't have the details of the repairs from that point in time with me today, as well as the driver of the flooding that may be happening more recently with the rain. We can maybe follow up with you offline in detail on that.
It's just, I made 9 years in office this weekend. And for 9 years, I've had the same issue with NYCHA, with this senior center. And repairs were made. I mean, the senior center, for some time, it was closed to make repairs in the building. And now these seniors, they're congregating in a place which I feel that is unsafe. And every time I bring it up, that's the same response I get. You're going to follow up. The leasing of property, I was recently talking to a supermarket owner in Brooklyn, and he had concerns because apparently I didn't know that NYCHA has property that you lease. And he's on a month-to-month lease, which is affecting his business because he cannot, where the distributors where he gets his supplies do not want to give him anything on credit, knowing that he's on a month-to-month lease. How much property does NYCHA lease? You just asked that?
Yeah, and I'll share my answer. Good morning, Councilmember. So we are starting to review all of our commercial spaces. Many of them face the same physical needs that our residential spaces face, so we've been limited in our ability to lease them out, but we are looking to be more strategic in that area, so we're taking stock and inventory of all of our commercial spaces. Happy to share that with you, and I definitely would like to get the information about this Brooklyn supermarket. We do have some supermarkets and other leases on our properties. I'm not familiar with a month-to-month setup, so I definitely want to find out more about that specific case.
I appreciate that. It's not in my district. We have a mutual friend, and he asked me to reach out, and I just wanted to see how we can be of help to him. It's difficult to run a business, a supermarket business, knowing you're a month-to-month, and your vendors know that you're in a month-to-month, and they do not want to give him credit so that he can supply his store. So it's an issue, and it's affecting his livelihood.
Absolutely. We're happy to follow up on that.
All right. Thank you. Just want to highlight, again, I made 9 years. In 2016, when I came into office, I remember that there was a total NYCHA for capital. The total cost to fix all of NYCHA was about $40 billion. And I see how it's ballooned to $78 billion, which is extremely sad. And, I'm not going to ask a question, but I just want to highlight that it's difficult for council members, and I've said this in the past, to allocate funding. And when we do give you the funding, it takes years and years and years to actually implement the funding that we allocated. And so it's just frustrating. Finally, I want to talk about the RAD and PACT. I know that it's not a one-size-fits-all, but I believe in it for smaller NYCHA developments. Stebbins, Hewitt, I know that it's almost completed. Do you have a timeline when the Stebbins Hewitt RAD PACT program will be completed?
I don't have that with me, but we can follow up with you the timeline?
I can tell you that it's been a life changer for the tenants that are there. I lived on that block for 20 years. I lived, and so, and when I became a council member, or when I was a district manager, the constant complaints about having a horrible winter, the boilers not working, the leaky roofs, the entrance to the doors are always broken. And so now this was the first winter that they had hot water, they had a boiler, did not need to complain. They feel more secure because there's surveillance cameras in the building, there's better lighting, and the outside of the building does not look like a NYCHA development. You know, it looks more like a privately owned, brand new, 100% affordable housing building that we've built. And they're confident, and what's mostly what they feel good about is that they know that they still have their NYCHA.
30 seconds to wrap up.
I got it. Thank you. That they still have their NYCHA privileges, and with that, I just wanted to say thank you for that.
No, you're so welcome. And it sounds to me like it probably closed, but they're in the middle of getting their repairs done.
Yeah.
And we hear that so much. What RADPAC does is provide the so very needed capital repairs that these buildings and these residents so desperately need. And the before and after, you know, you can go from building to building, whether it's a small one or a large development, and, you know, pictures say it all.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I will now move to Councilmember Aviles.
Thank you, Chair, again. I guess I wanted to follow up on a couple things. Can you walk me through the process related to the voucher holders? I understand that obviously there are many types of tenancy that you're trying to fill. But in terms of voucher holders, how long does it take to schedule appointments for those units that you are engaged with?
Councilmember, are you asking about appointments between the Section 8 voucher holder and the private landlord?
Yes, NYCHA as a landlord. So inspections that need to be done with some of these voucher holders, right? Apartments need to get inspected. Does NYCHA engage in that, and how long does that process take?
For our inspections of the private?
Yes.
I don't think we have that information with us today, but we can certainly follow up.
Brian has all the information. Siéntate.
So once a tenant is called, they then have to fill out a rental packet. Once their rental packet is completed and accepted, it usually takes between 2 and 3 weeks in order to get their apartment inspected. If somebody has if it's a VAWA case, you know, somebody with domestic violence issue, we can expedite it. But, you know, generally that's the time period for an inspection.
So from the rental packet to the final determination of inspection?
If it passes inspection, yeah, about a month.
Okay. And then if there are challenges with that process or it doesn't quite shake out that way, where does one call to move that process forward?
Sure, they can call the call center, or they can make an appointment in one of our walk-in centers if they want to speak to somebody in person in Brooklyn, in your, you know, close to your district. It's on Atlantic Avenue, and that's what they would follow through.
Okay, and then in terms of, just quick segue, you could probably stay there, you're gonna answer the questions. Specifically, as it relates to Red Hook, when can we expect the emergency boilers to be taken offline related to the sand and sea resiliency repair? Oh, siéntate, just pull up a chair.
Sure, thank you for the question, Councilmember Aviles. So the new boilers, the high pressure investment in the new boilers is already online and running for some time. Because that's a new technology for NYCHA, we don't use those type of high pressure boilers in any other properties. We're doing a little bit of an extended commissioning to train our staff and to make sure we're fully comfortable operating those. And for that reason, the temporary boilers have been kept on, but the system is already running on the new boilers.
But how long are we going to keep them on for training purposes and public nuisance of residents who have to deal with
Sure.
them?
I feel like I know the answer, but I don't want to get it wrong, so let me just follow up with you with the exact timeline that we've agreed.
Okay. And in terms of Red Hook in particular, could you provide my office with the numbers of folks that you have in eviction proceedings? Also would like to know specifically about the backlog of repairs across the development. We can follow up after. I just want to get the questions on the record. And then to this notion of property emergency allocation, obviously you stated it's portfolio-wide to give you flexibility to respond. How you respond to all manner of very important emergencies for every development, I do not know. But is there an allocation, let's say, for Red Hook in terms of capital repairs on how they can manage the property? And there might be tiers of this. There might be utter emergency, cataclysmic, and it might be a slightly smaller emergency. But does the development have a pool of resources that it is able to be somewhat responsive to in a quick time frame?
Sure. So to start, each development has an operating budget. What we have found, though, is when there are emergencies of that kind, the property manager doesn't have sufficient resources to respond. Otherwise, that would sort of decimate the entire annual budget.
Right.
So that's where we go to the property emergency bank, which we use across the entire portfolio. We add additional funding where we can. So if we get a new grant and we find that we've gotten additional money for the federal government, we'll put more in that line, for example. That's also where we'd work with Sean to say, hey, Sean, what do you have in ANCM for that property? Do you have money in your sort of contingency? So because, frankly, we have so many emergencies, we have sort of pools of contingency funding. The funding that you see there is actually what finance manages for things like a gas outage, a water main break, so that we can be responsive. If I get a budget modification requesting additional funding for that kind of emergency from a property, we respond within 24 to 48 hours. If it's sort of a larger scale emergency that requires planning and months of work, that's where we would, talk to Sean and his team on the ANCM contingency. So that money is really just there so that a property manager isn't waiting for weeks because they feel like if they were to use the funding in their budget, they wouldn't have anything left for the rest of the year. So it's really just a ways for us to be responsive quickly. We also have emergency funding and an emergency department, emergency services department, which is funded on the operating budget and managed centrally by Eva's team. So because there are so many emergencies, we find that we need to be really nimble and flexible and sort of provide the resources as quickly as we can through any manner. So if it's really quick, it would come from that emergency pot. If it's something that requires more planning, that's where we talk to the ANCM team run by Mr. Mabani.
Thank you. I'll follow up more specifically, but in terms of council-funded projects, in the testimony it said those projects are moving forward after kind of long-awaited delays. Can you speak to me more specifically about that?
Sure, thank you for the question. So yes, back about a year and a half ago, for capacity kind of constraints, we put about 55 projects that were council funded mainly, and some mayorally funded projects on pause formally to, rather than just not be able to move them forward but not communicate that, we wanted to be more explicit. And that allowed us to focus our resources on some of our major compliance commitments and the larger projects, the boilers, the elevators, things like that. We had committed to restart any paused projects by this July. We have restarted 75% already, and in fact, a number of them have completed construction. We have about 25% more to restart between now and June, and that should not be a challenge for us. What the benefit we've had from this process is that our project teams now are not overloaded, and they're able to focus on quality and other components on each of their projects, much more in line with what other capital project teams typically are managing. And so that 1 year or 1.5 year pause process really benefited us to be able to right-size the work so that our teams are giving the due attention to any project, no matter how big or small.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Aviles. We'll now move to Councilmember Marmorato.
Thank you. So you guys keep looking at statistics and numbers, and I just want to gently remind you guys that these are people's lives who are impacted by these statistics and these numbers. And as we start going through things, I see that you're spending $182 million on overtime. Wouldn't it be cheaper to hire more employees? And do you have a problem with recruitment?
So $182 million in overtime is actually a decrease from prior years. So
But
last
it's
year,
still a lot of money.
trust me, I agree with you. Last year, we spent $234 million in overtime, and that has helped us to meaningfully address the work order backlog. But to your point, that is unsustainable. And so we've decreased the budget to $182 million, and we are providing additional support for our staff through full-time staff as well as contracts to support the work order backlog.
Is there an issue with recruitment? I mean, are you just not hiring more employees? And, you talk about funding and this and that. These are simple little asks, like sweeping a floor with 2 inches of dust, food all over an elevator floor. These are simple maintenance issues that are not getting done. And I don't think it's because there's backup. These are things that should be done every single day.
So there is certainly a trade-off that we constantly face between overtime funding and hiring additional staff. We have a pretty high fringe and benefits rate, and at the same time, we are trying to manage getting all of the work done that you mentioned. And some of that work has to be done on overtime because we are trying to be responsive perhaps after hours. We also have scheduled versus unscheduled overtime. So for example, 30% of our overtime budget is for scheduled shift coverage on weekends to have caretakers and maintenance workers at the developments to pick up trash, sweep floors, mop, stairwells, et cetera, as you mentioned, on the weekends. So that, while it seems like it would be a normal cost because of our union contracts, that is considered overtime as well on Saturday.
Yeah, that's a big number. And I
I
just
just want to add, sorry, to answer your question, we actually don't have an issue with recruitment. We've improved our frontline hiring tremendously over the last year, so it's only taking us about 30 days to replace frontline staff. So we've worked hard with our HR department. They've made tremendous strides to make sure that we have bodies in all of our headcount, and so we're able to do that. But as we've said, overtime is a standard part of our business practice. It doesn't mean that we can transfer it easily to hiring new staff.
Do these maintenance workers have an accountability, something that they have to report what they actually do every single day?
Absolutely, and we're monitoring that every single day. So all maintenance workers, skilled trades, they work off of a handheld device. They have to clock in for their work orders. We're actually able to monitor their labor in real time in order to see how, what their time is per work order.
Okay, because I think that needs to be investigated a little bit more, only because of the fact that I get the text messages to my phone. They said they came and cleaned, and it's not the right location that they cleaned, or it's just an old picture of some sort. And I want to just touch on squatting because my time is limited. This is public housing. Wouldn't you want to address squatting before the 30 days are up, where they actually have rights to stay in the apartment? I mean, don't you want to find a pathway to success for these people to be in these apartments legally and the right way?
Absolutely, but there are many different types of squatters. There are people who go into vacant apartments. There are people who find out that a tenant is deceased and get in. The sheer volume is something that is very difficult to manage. Additionally, so 30 days is not a tremendous amount of time, but as Ms. Trimble said earlier, we've been working very closely with the police department to get people out. And one other thing that we should mention is sometimes we need to make sure that the person in there, we get calls all the time saying there's a squatter living next door to me, but we have to do the research to make sure that they're actually a squatter. They could be somebody with rights because they're exactly, a remaining family member.
Yeah, I mean, I have two specific incidents that I could have given you the information, and these people could have been thrown out almost immediately, that they are squatting in these apartments, and it doesn't take much to investigate, and I think you need to really put that on the forefront of what you guys are doing, because that will free up a lot of apartments, and I think it really poses a big public safety issue for the other families that want to live there peacefully and safely. So, all right, thank you, Chair. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Moderato. There was a recent report that came out that basically blamed NYCHA for delaying the rental assistance payments. Can you clarify the report?
Sure. Thank you for that question, Council Member. It's important to note that we had a federal funding freeze. So on January 28th, we were locked out of our federal grant disbursement system and were unable to receive funding. So that meant that our pending payments from the day prior were not released, and we could not request any additional reimbursements. That also happened to coincide with the end of the month and the beginning of February. So on February 1st, which was a Saturday, we were unsure whether we would actually start to receive our payments from the federal government. As you know, NYCHA is an administrator of the Section 8 program, so we receive the funding from the federal government and then we pay it to the landlords. On the 1st, we were actively monitoring our bank accounts to ensure whether that funding would actually come through, given the uncertainty in Washington. The funding was released on the 1st, which was a Saturday. It was not actually available to NYCHA until Monday the 3rd. And on the 3rd, we made the payments. So going forward, we will wait until we receive the funding from the federal government and make the payments. The same is true of this past month. Saturday was the 1st again. We waited for the money to be received. The money was made available on the 3rd, and we issued the payments in time.
Okay, so no longer.
I'm sorry?
That impasse is no longer.
Well, it's still, for now, it's still very uncertain, it's chaotic, and we are just managing the best that we can. But I think it's important for folks to note that we wait on the funding for the federal government and then make the payment.
Thank you for the clarification on that. When it comes to a vacant unit readiness, NYCHA's vacant unit readiness program helps prepare and rehabilitate NYCHA units for new tenants. The administration has moved successive rounds of funding for the program to the capital budget to generate expense savings. As of February, there were 5,577 NYCHA apartments. NYCHA had previously shared it wants to target 3,000 units for renovations annually. Where are you against that target year to date in the fiscal year 2025?
Thank you, Councilmember. I'm happy to report that we exceeded that target by turning over 4,000 units in the last fiscal year, 52% increase from the previous year.
Okay, and how many will still be needed to be unrenovated at the end of the fiscal year?
I can't give an exact estimate because, as I said, about 60% of our move-ins are transfers, so it creates another vacant upon move-in. And so we are working to increase our production as best as possible.
Okay, and are you working with the Office of Management and Budget on any additional certificates to proceed with the CPS for capital projects?
Yes, we continue to work with our colleagues at OMB. We actually updated our CP for this program recently to be able to unlock the additional capital funds, and we will do that going forward as well as they increase our funding.
Okay. The total funding in NYCHA adapted financial plan for vacant unit readiness is $67.9 million in fiscal year 2025. However, the funding drops to $43.3 million in fiscal year 2026. What's the reason for this drop?
So what you're actually seeing there is a bit of a rollover in fiscal year 2025. So any unspent funds for 24 get added to the 25 budget. We, of course, endeavor, as Eva mentioned, to increase our productivity and continue to turn over units. But every unit that you turn over because of the transfers creates another vacant unit. So we will just continue to work diligently to expedite our productivity and our processing. And if we need additional funds, we will work with our city partners, and they've been very generous and receptive.
Okay, I know last year, obviously, part of the budget, well, not the adapted budget, the preliminary budget, was cuts to the NYCHA security guards. NYCHA considered reducing funding for the guards at 55 senior developments across the city. Does the 2025 budget include funding for these positions, or will the city need to address the funding shortfall through its budget process?
Thank you, Councilmember. We have included full funding for the security guard program as it currently exists across the 52 senior buildings in the city in our 25 budget. And
what's that figure?
it's just about 7 million.
Okay. Are there plans for an increase?
There's no plans for increase at this time. We're maintaining the current program as is.
Okay. And I know there was some of the developments that didn't have cameras, those senior developments that didn't have cameras. I know that's part of the, is that a capital, would that be a capital request?
That would require capital funding.
Okay. Is that capital, is there any support for capital to improve the security apparatus in these senior buildings?
Thank you, Chair Banks. Yeah, we have a large number of ongoing CCTV projects that are funded either by mayoral funds, city council funds, or even state assembly member funds. So there are ongoing projects to either install CCTV or expand it at a number of sites. If there's specific sites that you're interested in, we can follow up on those.
Okay. We know throughout NYCHA that most of the time, well, all the time, I believe that the cameras are located in the lobby area or next to any of the exits of the development. Is there any plan to put cameras on the grounds?
We do have, Councilmember, we have over 20,000 cameras across our portfolio, including lobbies, public space areas, and around the grounds.
In Cypress houses, where are the cameras located exactly, or to your knowledge?
I'm not going to disclose that here in the hearing. We don't want everyone to know where all the cameras are. That's what makes them so useful to us. But I'm happy to follow up with you separately as to cameras at Cypress.
Are there cameras located in the lobby area?
I can't speak to that here.
Are there cameras located near the exits?
I will not speak to that here. Again, the usefulness of the cameras sometimes is that they are not completely obvious, so that they're better at catching conditions and situations.
Maybe I can just add, like at Cypress Hills, we have an active CCTV project in construction. When we determine camera locations, we work with the property management and the resident leadership on where they think the optimal locations are, as well as our own Office of Security and Safety. So resident input around the location and the priority of the cameras is always taken. And in fact, our resident leaders will sign off the location plan before we move ahead with the project. And so we do take into account what we're hearing from the residents at the site around what are the priority needs.
So to access those cameras, how's that process done?
Our CCTV unit has remote access to those cameras, and so they can review footage for any of the cameras they have access to.
Okay. A couple of more questions. Just give me 1 minute, Gail. Thank you. Gail, you can ask your questions. Not a problem.
Just back to trying to get the apartments renovated and dealing with repairs. So we get a lot of the neighbor upstairs is a problem, won't give us access, blah, 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 and the problem has to be fixed in their apartment in order to have the apartment below fixed. Is that who is supposed to be working on those kinds of issues? That's not an easy one. I'm not going to say that, but I'm sure it happens often.
Yes, and property management uses their right to enter when there are emergency repairs. And so we start with a 48-hour notice to the resident upstairs saying that we need to get in order to make a repair, to trace a leak, to see what's going on that's affecting, their neighbors. We usually coordinate with NYPD before we do any type of drill out, because we want to make sure that our staff are safe and that we avoid any type of conflict or situation. But we are using our right to enter in order to complete repairs.
Okay. And then can you get back to us, you're going to get back to us to the chair, about the commercial?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, I'm sorry.
We have a couple of more questions. This is around the RAD PACT. Does NYCHA have any initiatives to maintain the cohesion of the authority, even as it splits into 2 or 3 different funding models across many different private property management agencies? And how many are anticipated to be part of the PACT by the end of 2025 and 2026?
Councilmember, we are on pace to convert slightly over 30,000 units, but ultimately since we started our plan, we ultimately have the authority to convert 62,000 units.
Okay.
Just for RAD. Yeah, for RAD.
Can you repeat that?
So we are on pace to convert about slightly over 30,000 units. And ultimately, we have authority to do 62,000 units throughout the whole portfolio.
Can you cite those conversions by development?
I'm sorry.
Can you cite them by development?
I can get this committee a list, yes, of where they are, ones that have already been converted, and also where they are in the pipeline.
In the pipeline, yes. Okay. And in those converted, or those developments that are in the pipeline to be converted, I mean, I have to get this on the record again. Is there a commitment to allow those NYCHA developments to have a formal voting process?
No, not at this time.
And again, since you won't be allowing those residents to weigh in on whether or not they want to go RAD, are you comfortable with moving forward with those conversions without having support from the residents?
NYCHA does more in the way of engagement than any other housing authority, and more than what's required by HUD. HUD requires public housing authorities to have 2 meetings before making the decision to convert through the RAD impact.
How many meetings have you increased it by since you speak? Only required to have 2.
We have years of engagement and an incredible amount of time and effort is spent by our RED unit. We also have the Tenant Association involved in choosing the PACT developer. So the engagement is deep, the engagement is real, and of course, Chair Banks, if you have any suggestions on how you think we should, leaving voting aside,
well, that's my number one suggestion. Allow the residents to make that decision.
Yeah, we're happy to talk to you about that.
No. I want to continue this conversation because we obviously it's clear that NYCHA and the administration is hell bent on converting more developments, and we just want to make sure that the residents obviously able to weigh in on that, not after the fact, but before the process begins.
I can tell you what we are hell-bent on is providing capital investments in our
that should be
properties.
provided regardless. I mean, we can't play this game of holding up repairs or needed capital investments. We can't hold that over the residents' head, especially when it comes to them being a part of that process. And the constant, because I've heard that many a times. I heard it even the last hearing, to lay out the capital needs and so forth and so forth. But at the end of the day, the residents, regardless of whatever condition the development is in, the tenants need to have a say on if they want to be converted.
So, Councilmember,
Would you agree? Or would you?
I'll let the CEO
Well, let
answer
the
that
CEO,
question, and then
yes.
I'll add to
But
it.
I think you opined on that at the last hearing. I would like to hear the CEO. Thank you.
I think resident engagement is important. However, we have buildings that we've had to empty and board up because the capital need was just so great. And I think everyone is fooling themselves if they think that these issues are going to resolve themselves. PACT is a model that works. And we see hundreds of buildings that have converted where tenants are living in the conditions that they deserve to be living in. In contrast, we have an $80 billion capital need, and there's no money coming from DC to provide that support. Maintenance is tied to capital repairs, which is tied to the conditions of our apartments.
Well, listen, I've heard that in the previous hearing, and we do understand there's a major need for capital investment in public housing. We're just saying give the tenants the right to weigh in on that. I just want to be clear that it's not night and day in the need for capital investments. And if the residents choose to go PAC, that should be a choice they should make. And that's what I'm hoping the administration, I'm hoping the authority understands, that the residents just want to have a say. And to say that we do years and years of engagement, it just comes off as you're just throwing this program at the residents, and they really don't have a true say in the future of the development.
Sure. So, Councilmember, so in your district, there's two developments, Linden houses and Boulevard houses, two of probably some of the largest developments in your district. Not the largest, so Cypress Hills that we talked about
Pink houses.
as is huge, and Brinken is huge as well. Linden and Boulevard were both state-funded projects. They were built by the state of New York, and the state abandoned both of those developments in 1998. So those developments were left with no capital, no operating funds. They were run solely on rent and money that we took, federal money that we took from other developments like Cypress, like Brinken, which we know need a lot of funding as it is, and we funded it into Linden and Boulevard. Only through conversion were we able to find the funding that they needed in order to bring investment into those properties.
Brian, Brian, I get it. I get that part, and I think you do that so eloquently in laying out the need for capital investment. I get that. We get that. Mm-hmm. We're just saying that we want to form a voting process for the residents. That's it. I think we're not going to back away from that. I'm not backing away from it. We want you to understand the need, the importance of real community engagement is to allow residents to have a say, and that's what it boils down to. I don't know what the fight is or the resistance is from the authority to just say, well, let's explore that when it comes to PAC converted developments. Doing a survey, those things are important as well. Having the community engagement meetings are important, but first and foremost, there needs to be a formal voting process for these developments. I don't see how could it hurt? How could it hurt? Part of the conversion is getting the residents to sign over to a Section 8 lease. You want folks to be able to do that willingly. And you want a decent percentage of the development to be in support of it. You mentioned Boulevard and Linden houses. I mean, Linden houses and Urban House and Linden houses. We welcome the investments that were done through the program. But if you ask those residents today if they had a choice or a decision on being converted, they'll say no. This program was just shoved down our throats. And we had no say. Yes, there was some degree of community engagement that was done, and I sat through some of those meetings. But if you speak to the residents, they would say they didn't have a say over it, and the way in that you purport was not. It didn't give the residents the final say.
I attended many of those meetings myself. In fact, I led some of them myself, and I will say that it was something that had to be done. The risk of those two developments being habitable was real. And, anybody was at Boulevard or Linden before versus now, there is no way you could say it was better before. And I think what is really important is to make sure that residents have decision-making when it comes to what the repairs are going to look like, who they're going to be the new partners, be engaged as much as they possibly want. But there's no other, we don't decide, on the BQE, are we going to have a vote of people that live in downtown Brooklyn, whether we're going to have a new highway. We don't decide, in a community, are we going to have a vote if we're going to invest in the school. These are, these investments need to be done. We have an obligation, as the Housing Authority, to be stewards of a property, and we need to make sure that these properties are there for this generation, for the generation afterwards, and the generation following that.
I respect that, and again, we just agree to disagree on how we go about informing and bringing the residents in. I hope that the authority comes around to really a real, true engagement with the residents of NYCHA when it comes to the RAD-PACT converted developments. And I hope we can get to a point where the residents are really, truly a part of that process. And it's not something just being forced down their throats to have to accept. We look forward to continue engagement on this, and hopefully we can get to that point. Councilman Voucher, did you have any questions?
I had a question. I wanted to follow up on my line of question earlier regarding rent arrears. NYCHA is collecting 63% of the rent owed, including arrears, across its portfolio. In a previous hearing, we went into detail contrasting that with the RAD-PACT. What percentage are the RAD-PACT partners, what percentage of rent are they collecting?
I want to make sure I have that number, but I want to say that it's in the high 90s.
The high?
90.
Okay,
90%.
so the high 90s.
Exactly.
One factor that to which that can be attributed is the fact that RAD-PACT partners are allowed to do rent amnesty. When they take over a development, they can give amnesty to everyone there. I think one of the other concerns is that RAD-PACT partners can proceed with eviction for non-payment. How much of a factor is that in the high collection rate that RAD-PACT has versus the 63%?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Voucher, for that question. I think certainly the ability for residents to start fresh with a zero balance has a lot to do with the high percentage of rent collection that you see at the RAD-PACT properties. So, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
The ability of the RAD-PACT partners to start their tenants off at zero has a lot to do with the high percentage of rent collection. So they do not have arrears most times. The policies certainly differ. Some partners will give them partial forgiveness, full forgiveness. NYCHA does not have the authority to forgive rent. That is not contemplated in the United States Housing Act, and HUD has reiterated that to PHAs multiple times. We cannot forgive rent. So we are on the hook to collect 100% of the rent owed to us, be it new charges as well as arrears. But again, I think that the ability to forgive rent is why you see a 90% rent collection rate at a PACT property.
And just going to your question about evictions, both NYCHA and the PACT partners have an incentive to keep people housed. So evictions are really a last resort. But I will say that in 2025, NYCHA has executed 15 evictions so far as of the end of January. Our PACT partners have executed 10 evictions, 9 non-payment and 1 holdover. And when
In what time period?
That was just for the month of January.
So in the month of January, across the 30, how many units have been converted so far?
Hold on. At over 24,000.
24,000. There were 10 citywide, and 9 of the 10 were for non-payment.
Correct.
And why would those 9 be evicted for non-payment versus ostensibly there's quite a few others that are behind as well?
Well, so
I mean, the number's low. To me,
the number is incredibly low.
But I'm just curious, like,
Less
what are
than
the
a percentage
circumstances there?
Well, I think when you look, and I also have the numbers if you're interested for 2024, 2023, and 2022, we are all beholden to the court system. There is an incredible backlog in landlord-tenant court. I will say that in January 2025, the average amount owed for the 67 non-payment cases that NYCHA filed, the amount owed was $60,875. That's in stark contrast to the number that we were talking about for people who, for the most part, were not rent delinquent prior to COVID, and then incurred substantial arrears because of the pandemic.
How does NYCHA work with the RAD-PACT partners on a case-by-case basis for tenants in RAD-PACT developments that are in arrears?
We have guidelines that our PACT partners must follow, which basically mirror our guidelines. There is a tremendous amount of outreach that they must do before proceeding to, through an eviction process. And in 2024, for example, there were 6,817 pre-eviction outreach cases were initiated in 2024 for PACT. However, the total number of people who were evicted in 2024 was 98. So
98 out of the 20...
6,700,
right,
or whatever.
and the 24,000 RAD-PACT
exactly.
units.
So there's a tremendous amount of work that's done. The goal is to get people to start paying their rent, not to evict people, whether it's in PACT or at NYCHA.
Who makes the decision whether or not rent amnesty will be given upon a RAD-PACT conversion?
The developers.
Just wanted to say now that the conversion being contemplated in our district, we're going to want amnesty for all our tenants in arrears.
We'll pass that message along. Thank you.
Just before we conclude the testimony from the administration or from the authority, just want to piggyback off of some of the comments that my colleague made, Councilman Voucher, and just get some clarification on stuff. Is it also? I know this happened in Linden houses. There was a rent amnesty given to the residents. To pry a little deeper. Has it been done in some of the other developments where there has been no rent amnesty, and what percentage of the rent is collected that goes to NYCHA and the management company keeps, or the new developers keep?
So once the development is converted, NYCHA does not receive any of the rent. The rent payments going forward all go to the developer. And to your point, yes, the strategy with regard to how they treat rent arrears is determined by the developer and that particular transaction. And so there are cases where they might offer no partial or full, amnesty, as you call
But
it.
you gave testimony in the past that said there was agreements that were made between the authority and some of these Rat Pact where NYCHA will get a portion of the rent.
Arrears.
Arrears. Well,
Yes, we don't get the rent going forward.
whatever's in arrears. What developments has that type of agreement been agreed to, and can you provide us with any numbers as far as how much rent has been collected?
Sure, we can certainly provide statistics for the converted developments and how the arrears were treated.
Okay. The amnesty that was, is that also part of the conversation when the conversions are taking place? Is that a recommendation that is made by NYCHA to give a rent amnesty to the residents?
With respect to amnesty for rent arrears, it's not a partner-only decision, but it's made in collaboration with.
And when it's the community engagement process is taking place, is that also included in the conversation to the residents that it possibly can be an amnesty given for rent?
Well,
or those scenarios set up where we may.
I'm not sure whether or not that is something that's discussed, because the decision about rental arrears is based on project financing. So I think that's a decision that's made between our PACT partner and our RED team, our real estate team.
So when a PACT developer makes a decision to give amnesty, I was told that by one particular developer that they did it just to kind of clean the slate. So that doesn't seem to be something that's taken consideration as far as the financing
Well,
piece.
I would think that they could only clean the slate if the numbers add up. I mean, right?
Well, I mean, obviously, some of those developments, there's been high rent delinquencies in some of those developments, right? To your knowledge, Brian, are there any particular developments that you know where there's been a high rent delinquency that has been converted over, where there's been a complete amnesty given?
Yeah, I mean, there are several, and we can get to the developments where they have bought back the debt, and so there is a financial, right? It does weigh into the finances of the final deal, because they're not just forgiving, they are buying back the debt, so the debt owed. So in our engagement, we don't usually like to mention this because we don't want to promise something that may not happen, right? We do the same thing too when people ask for like the final scope. People often think that we're withholding information. We're certainly not,
Right.
But we know that it's a long process, and I don't want to be there and say we're going to promise everybody new X, or we're going to promise everybody.
I mean, you promise everyone new refrigerators and new
Exactly.
stoves and new floors and
Right.
painted. Okay.
But there are some things that are we know for sure, like, people are gonna get new kitchens and bathrooms. You know, we know that's gonna be part of the scope. We know there's security's going to, there's some minimums, but when there are some extra things, we can't promise it.
All right, understandable. And the last thing I just want to have a little conversation about is the materials. I know it was pointed out that by the administration, by the authority, that when RAD PACT developments, when they're converted over to RAD, it's because obviously the needed capital investment, from obviously the disrepair and the dilapidation. Are you aware that there are NYCHA developments that have been converted over to RAD PACT that are dealing with some of the same deterioration conditions that they were dealing with prior to, before the conversion?
I've heard you mention it before, and I've heard some other people mention this before.
Not people, residents.
Residents, excuse me. I'm sorry. Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry. So residents and advocates as well before. The thing I would say about that is, number one, they should be brought to us, and we do work very closely with all the partners to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to. It also just doesn't make sense to me, though, because there is a financial incentive for them to make sure that they're passing inspections, because Section 8 requires an annual inspection. It used to be, so now it's called Inspire. They have to pass Inspire inspections in order to keep their funding going. So if what they have put in place is not holding up, that's going to put their funding in jeopardy.
Okay. Well, again, I would love to invite the CEO and whoever would like to come with her to do a tour through Linden Houses, which you hail up. And we would also like to take you to Boulevard Houses as well, to speak to some of the residents that have been converted over, and you can hear directly as to how they feel about the inferior materials that are being used to be put in their apartments. And after a 3-week rehab, that they're dealing with some of the same conditions that they dealt with under your administration.
I'm happy to come back out there. I was there, I think we were there about 18
You
months
at
ago.
Florentino Houses, but Florentino?
No, I was also.
I know you at Florentino Houses.
I've been to all of them.
I was well aware you at Florentino Houses. Florentino Houses is a little different. That was
Very different, but I've been to
gut
Linden and
rehab
Boulevard
where
as
you
well.
you removed everybody out the development. That to me made sense. But when it comes to Boulevard and Linden Houses, I would love for you to come. And then after we leave Boulevard and Linden, we can go straight down the block to a NYCHA development that is still run by NYCHA, Cypress Houses, and we could also see some of the things that you claim that doesn't happen there, doesn't exist.
Happy to do it. Actually, I was there with Councilmember Barron.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. So we were with Ms. Barnes and the former council member.
Well, listen,
we'll be happy to do
we
that.
look forward to. I'm the new council person, so I look forward to and it's new issues.
Yep.
So we look forward to hopefully to address those, and we invite you out to the 42nd Councilmatic District. Thank you so much for your testimony. And if possible, can the administration, could the authority stay behind to hear some of the testimony? Thank you. Okay, now I'll open the hearing for public testimony. members of the public that this is a government proceeding and that decorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant of Arms for inclusion into the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant of Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on today's hearing topic. If you have written statement or additional written testimony and you wish to submit for the record, please provide a copy of the testimony to the Sergeant of Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of this hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. We will now turn our testimony to, we'll turn the opportunity for testimony to the panel, and we'll call up Emmanuel Martinez, James Alcavia, Darren Seeley, and Trenton Price. Please approach. Thank you. We will start with James Alcavera.
Hello. I want to start off by saying thank you, Councilman Chris Banks, for noticing my development, Cypress Hills development, which needs a walkthrough. Public safety is one of the issues that we're having right now. So they was talking about the CCT cameras, right? But in my development, all the cameras are spray painted and taped up. So that one right there is a public safety issue because none of the cameras is working. So if crime was to happen in the building or where the cameras is located at, you won't be able to see anything because they all spray painted and they're taped. And this been going on since, I believe, December 10th. It's now March. What else we have? Lighting is bad in the development. We have no playgrounds for the kids to come outside and play. We have a city park, but it's a city's park. It's not a NYCHA. It's not on NYCHA. It's on NYCHA's ground, but it's owned by the city. It's not like if we come outside of our buildings, we don't have playgrounds for the kids to come. There's not one playground in there for the kids to play. So there's really nothing available for the kids to grow up to. Like, there's nothing there. And with me being a new TA president, I'm just fighting for what's right. And we also have a lot of complaints with tenants and an apartment. The maintenance work is property manager, if you ask me. Yeah, and I'll just leave that there. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done in my development, and I will appreciate it if they do come and walk to see for themselves what we go through on a daily basis. Thank you.
Before you conclude, you're the TA president for Cypress Houses, am I correct?
Correct. I'm the new TA president for Cypress Hills Projects, yes.
You may proceed. Are we going to start it?
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Banks and members of the Committee on Public Housing. My name is Trenton Price. I'm the Executive Director of the Salvadori Center. I'm a former middle school teacher and assistant principal and a district administrator for arts education before I joined Salvadori 2 years ago. I'm really passionate about education and facilitating experiences for young people to work together and empower their voices. At Salvadori, we provide STEAM education, that's STEM plus the A for arts and architecture. to schools and after-school sites and NYCHA communities across the city. For context, last year, Salvadori worked with over 12,000 students in 145 schools and NYCHA community centers. We are grateful to have the support of the council through multiple CASA and digital inclusion and literacy grants, as well as the after-school enrichment and speakers initiative at numerous NYCHA sites across the city. And it's this work that brings me here to speak today. As a longtime partner of NYCHA for over 15 years, we see firsthand the need for robust out-of-school time programming for children and youth in public housing communities. In our programs, young people clamor for the opportunity to work together and build solutions to design challenges that impact their communities. These real-life challenges engage their brains, foster collaboration, and make connections to career pathways they may not have considered. For example, last summer, Salvadori worked with middle school youth in East New York and Astoria to learn about the built environment and to propose designs for their own community center in their NYCHA communities, which we then brought to life. With so many pressing priorities for residents of public housing, we know programming for children and youth can sometimes feel like not a priority, but to the contrary, investing in pathways for children and youth is one of the most critical things we can do to support the success of future generations. I want to thank this committee, Chair Banks, and the Council for your investment in the futures of our youth and encourage you to deepen that support for out-of-school time partnerships. I ask that you consider an increase to CASA and digital inclusion and literacy to provide these opportunities for young people in public housing communities. We're grateful to be of service in New York City's youth and stand ready to do more. Thank you for your dedication in this hearing.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Good afternoon, Chair Banks and esteemed members of the Public Housing Committee. My name is Darren Seeley, and I serve as the Associate Director of the Housing Resource Center at the Red Hook Community Justice Center, an initiative of the Center for Innovation. Access to safe, stable, and affordable housing is the foundation of economic and community well-being. Yet NYCHA residents continue to face hazardous living conditions, chronic repair delays, and ongoing threats of eviction. Our work at the Housing Resource Centers in Harlem and Red Hook directly address these challenges. These centers provide court navigation, one-on-one tenant assistance, and direct connections to legal and financial resources. Last year, we supported over 2,600 NYCHA residents, helping them document repair needs, advocate for lease protections, and navigate the court system. Recognizing the increasing housing instability across public housing, the center launched a citywide housing navigator initiative embedding housing navigators in East Harlem, the South Bronx, Far Rockaway, and Red Hook. These navigators work directly with NYCHA developments to assist tenants in resolving rental arrears, addressing habitability concerns, and preventing evictions, ensuring that residents receive the report they need before reaching a crisis point. In addition, through our virtual court access network, also known as VCAN, we help tenants respond to eviction notices, file housing part actions for needed repairs, and connect with court services remotely. VCAN ensures that NYCHA residents who often face barriers to in-person court access can still exercise their legal right without unnecessary delays or procedural roadblocks. We urge the Council to continue funding these essential programs. Supporting NYCHA residents means supporting housing justice, equity, and the well-being of our communities. Thank you for your time and commitment to this issue.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Good afternoon. Okay. Whoa. Good afternoon. Manny Martinez, South Jamaica Houses, citywide resident empowerment. For over a decade, the New York City Housing Authority has received tens of billions of dollars in federal funds, money meant to rebuild communities, create jobs, and secure the economic mobility of public housing residents. Instead, NYCHA has weaponized these funds to expand executive salaries while denying residents their legal economic rights. NYCHA doesn't have a funding problem, it has a corruption problem. It refuses to invest in the economic rights of the communities it serves, blocking pathways that would make public housing residents financially stable. A simple, measurable goal, helping just 30% of NYCHA households reach the flat rent, would eliminate NYCHA's deficit in 3 to 5 years. But that would mean thousands of Black and Hispanic families transitioning from out of poverty, gaining power and demanding accountability, and that is what NYCHA fears most. Instead, NYCHA is spending millions to expand executive salaries while public housing remains in crisis. It refuses to provide jobs and contracts to residents, even though over 7,000 vacant apartments sit unleased, units that could be used as training grounds for resident employment and move-outs, maintenance, and repairs. NYCHA's operational budget is The largest share of its funding is completely shielded from economic rights of the residents who keep this system running. Our communities feel the neglect every single day. Trespassers overrun our spaces while NYCHA refuses to enforce basic housing policies. There are over 19,000 security cameras, but not a single one is used to protect residents or maintain order. Elevators reek of urine. Stairwells are used as toilets. Strangers sleep in front of our apartment doors. Meanwhile, intercoms remain broken, entrance doors stay unsecured, and residents are obstructed from getting access to keys. NYCHA has turned public housing into a free-for-all for criminals while locking its own residents out of economic opportunity. May I have 30 seconds?
Yeah, you have a minute to click.
And it's not just NYCHA leadership. From 2010 to 2020, billions was spent and no one was held accountable. The New York City comptrollers, past and present, acknowledged NYCHA's legal obligation to enforce residents' economic rights, yet they have never scrutinized contractors who openly violate these mandates. Instead, they blame the mayor while running for mayor themselves. 2 state representatives played a direct role in the economic sabotage of public housing residents. They either supported or ratified New York State ERAP legislation that made it illegal for public housing residents to access emergency rental assistance, despite a warning from the U.S. Treasury that blocking ERAP for public housing may violate the Fair Housing Act. New York State was the only state in the country to do this, despite having the largest public housing population in the nation. One of these representatives was once the HUD secretary, and maybe that was the point. Then there's NYCHA's pet organization, the Citywide Council of Presidents. This is not an independent resident organization. NYCHA created it, NYCHA owns it. And yesterday, CCOP itself admitted as much when it stated, despite our legal status, a clear acknowledgement that it does not have the legal status to exist as a resident organization. NYCHA isn't just failing, it is rigging the system against its own residents. The solution is clear: a mass resignation of NYCHA executives, the full enforcement of economic rights promised to our public housing residents. And this is what we're asking for the Public Housing Committee and the New York City Council to help us achieve. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your advocacy. Thank you, guys. Now we'll have Sharon Brown. Sorry about that. We will have Noah Cohen, Richard Soho, Laura Lazarus, and Elizabeth Rodriguez. Noah Cohen, Richard Soho, Laura Lazarus, Elizabeth Rodriguez. Yep, you can take your seat at the thing. No, just take your seat. Thank you. Okay, I guess we'll begin with Noah Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Banks and members of the committee. I'm here to really talk about how NYCHA's false promises have directly affected folks like me. I live in a homeless shelter right now in Brooklyn, and a lot of our residents applied through NYCHA for Section 8 vouchers back in June. The wait list was open for 6 days, and they had a record amount of applications. Over 600,000 people applied for Section 8 through NYCHA. 200,000 were approved for the wait list. NYCHA promised that they were going to give out over 1,000 vouchers per month. Guess how many? 8 months later, 8 months after these applications were received, what do we have now? They have given out, they have doled out 2,400 vouchers. They promised 1,000 a month. That is unacceptable, and right now we have folks languishing in shelters like my own, with rats, with rodents, with gnats flying all over, with them not making basic repairs. And you know what? Folks languishing in NYCHA housing are experiencing a lot of the same conditions. My name is Noam Cohen. I am a member of a grassroots organization, for those who don't know, called Vocal New York, and we advocate for folks that are directly experiencing issues like homelessness. And when it comes to NYCHA residents, we have NYCHA residents who are members of our organization who the conditions were so awful in NYCHA housing. They were dealing with, mold on the ceiling, with basic repairs not being made, all the stuff that we've been talking about during this hearing. And I actually know a member personally who ended up moving into a homeless shelter because they figured that the conditions would, one, not be as awful as NYCHA housing, and two, they'd at least have a shot at getting a voucher. Unfortunately, that's not the case. We have people waiting for very long periods of times. Understood.
Yeah.
We have people waiting for very long periods of times just to get a voucher, just to get housing. And we are basically prolonging people's stay in the shelter system by doing what we're doing now. We really need robust oversight of NYCHA. I would really like somebody to introduce a bill that would allow council members the authority to walk into a NYCHA facility at any time, 24/7, to inspect the conditions, to talk directly to residents. Same thing with the shelter system. I would like them to have that kind of authority as well. I would encourage the council to use their oversight authority and to expand their oversight authority to inspect the conditions in the shelter system, to inspect the conditions in NYCHA housing, and stand up for our residents who are really hurting right now, and people should not have to live like this. People should not have to live in a place that is unsafe. They should not have to live in a place where there are rats and rodents and
Thank you for your testimony.
And gnats all over. They shouldn't have to live in a place that isn't providing basic repairs and continues to increase their executive salaries, their CEO salaries, their board member salaries. It's unacceptable.
Thank you for your advocacy and your testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Banks.
Now we'll move to Richard Soho.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Banks and members of the public housing.
You want to speak into the mic or turn it on?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Banks and members of the Public Housing Committee for the opportunity to testify. My name is Richard Suhu, and I am the Tenant Services Coordinator at 64 Norfolk HDFC at the Chinese American Planning Council, CPC, the nation's largest Asian American social service organization. In 1 square block of New York City in the Lower East Side, CPC has 350 units of affordable housing, with 265 of those units being earmarked for seniors, with 58 of those units set aside for the formerly unhoused. I want to share a story of one of our residents. KJ, incarcerated in 1973 and released in 2001, has struggled with unstable housing and relies on a loose support system of friends and family, though they have been in and out of shelters themselves. He resides in a housing unit for the formerly unhoused at 64 Norfolk, but has faced several health setbacks, including hospitalizations for high blood pressure and diabetes. KJ has an expired state ID, which led to the expiration of his housing subsidy during a City FEPS recertification. Additionally, he was unaware of over $800 in late fees and legal charges, which had been sent to collections, and had also fallen behind in a Con Edison bill. With assistance from his case manager at CPC, his subsidy has been renewed, a payment plan for the utility setup, and the arrears are being addressed through an HRA one-shot deal. Our communities heavily rely on housing assistance services, the ones that we provide. However, our communities deserve a city where housing is afforded to every New Yorker. We urge the city to invest in more affordable housing, which includes expanding City FEPS eligibility. We must have housing that is inclusive of seniors with social services and healthcare provided, that is local and accessible to our communities. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Laura Lazarus.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Banks. My name is Laura Lazarus, and I'm the co-founder and chief executive officer of Anthos Home. Thank you for the opportunity to testify about using housing vouchers and a better way to use them and expand their use. Anthos Home is committed to helping New Yorkers with housing vouchers find and move into permanent housing as quickly as possible. We know that housing vouchers are one of the most effective tools to address homelessness and housing instability, but too often they are difficult to use. In New York City, it takes families an average of at least a year to secure housing after receiving a voucher. This delay prolongs shelter stays and forces families to remain in unstable and challenging conditions. This isn't a problem unique to New York. Nationally, nationally nearly 40% of federally issued housing vouchers are not used. New York City has made tremendous progress in addressing homelessness, particularly through the City FEPS program. In the past year alone, DSS has helped more than 14,000 households into permanent housing, a 45% increase over the previous year. This achievement is a testament to the city's commitment to tackling homelessness at scale and ensuring that a housing voucher is a pathway to a home. Despite this progress, persistent barriers prevent voucher holders from accessing stable housing, both at NYCHA and throughout the city. These challenges include finding landlords willing to accept vouchers, delays in processing approvals and payments, and the need for more robust support services to help tenants maintain their homes. Tackling homelessness cannot be the responsibility of one program or agency. A crisis of this magnitude requires strong partnerships between government, nonprofits, and the private sector, particularly the real estate community. That's where we come in. Anthos Homes' model is designed to help tenants and landlords overcome these obstacles so that vouchers can be utilized quickly and effectively. Our approach includes proactively securing apartments through a network of landlords and brokers, ensuring that families with vouchers have immediate access to housing options. Additionally, our flexible funding model allows us to cover necessary repairs for inspection approvals, moving costs, application fees, and other expenses.
30 seconds to wrap it up if you need it.
We also provide critical support for both tenants and landlords throughout the process, from assisting with paperwork to ensuring units and tenants are move-in ready. We help streamline what can otherwise be a slow and disjointed system. Once families are housed, we provide ongoing support for at least a year, including monthly check-ins, help with repairs, and intervention if payment issues arise. It's this wraparound approach that has reduced the burden on landlords while ensuring tenants have their resources. And our model has proved effective over the last 18 months. To date, we have helped more than 270 families and individuals move into housing, and every single one of them remains stably housed. And I just wanted to add a note based on the testimony today from NYCHA that in our experience, in terms of working with NYCHA, we do think that there can be improvements in terms of the time frame in which inspections are scheduled. We know that in our experience, it has been taking 4 to 6 weeks to just schedule an inspection, right, and then another 2 weeks to actually have the inspection happen. And then it's very difficult to actually follow up with an actual person at NYCHA to figure out when there are problems, what's going on.
Ditto, I agree. Thank you for your testimony. We will now move to Elizabeth Rodriguez.
Thank you, Chris Bank. I vote. How you doing? Good afternoon. I'm happy to be here, and I'm here to say about RAPAC and NYCHA. I live in Reese, as you know my name. I live in Jacob Reese, and they over here, by trying to get the votes, they go and they actually knock on certain doors where there's seniors, and they threaten harassing them if they don't sign for PACT, that they will be getting off. They'll lose their apartment. And I can have that. I mean, I go around, people tell me, I know them for years. Okay, I've been in housing for years. My son is 41 years old. Well, he's gonna be 41, and he was raised in housing. You can imagine that. I'm gonna be 68. And I can't stand when people come and harass them for their votes. They're scared to open the doors. They say, I'm gonna lose my apartment. We don't want PACT. We the people don't want PACT. We're going around making petitions. We're gonna make it hurt. We don't want them. We never asked for them. So why they here? Trying to take over us? It's gonna be worse than what housing is doing right now. Housing and repairing, they ain't gonna repair nothing. All they're gonna do is take out people, and that's not right. And I'm not just fighting for me, but I'm fighting for my community, where I live, for the mama, papas, grandpas that are there, that raise their kids, their grandchildren, and they're intimidated, they're scared. So as Chris Bank, I'll invite you down and you talk to tenants, and they'll let you know. You'll see them, some of them that come out, the seniors will come out when it's a nice, hot, warm day to chill out there and see their neighbors, you know, and we don't want PACT.
30 seconds to wrap it up.
We just don't want them. get them out. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
I
your
appreciate it.
advocacy. Thank you for your testimony, panel. Thank you. Now we'll have Jesse Colas, and we'll have Arlene Jeter, and we'll have Christopher Leon Johnson. Okay, you may begin your testimony.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chair Banks and the committee. So I want to start by introducing myself. My name is Jessie Maldonado Cocles, New York City Regional Director for Citizen Action of New York, that organizes communities across the city around various issues, and one of our bases is public housing residents. We're here to advocate for at least $1.5 billion in capital funding for NYCHA. We know that the federal government has consistently given less than NYCHA needs, and we really can't count on them, especially in the current administration, which means that the city has to step up their budget. There's a $45 billion backlog in repairs, some estimates have, so it's really needed. Last year there was $779 million in the budget, yet 98% of that went to Section 8, so the Preservation Trust or PACT programs, and only 2% went to Section 9, which is not nearly enough. And so, yeah, we just really want to, I know that you've heard the stories of the lack of repairs and upgrades that are needed desperately on developments. And so that money could go towards that. And we want to make sure that it doesn't just go towards the Section 8 programs. And I know that NYCHA mentioned that there's, historic resident involvement in these programs and these conversions. We are witnessing a historic moment in resident democracy on NYCHA campuses. Of the 4 developments, only 4 developments were given the opportunity to vote on their future. None selected the PACT program. 1 chose to remain Section 9, and 3 developments opted for the trust. And the city must respect these choices and ensure fair and equitable funding for all NYCHA communities, regardless of their chosen management structure. And the New York City Council should ensure that a vote against PACT does not mean no repairs and no improvements come. And we know that many of the developments—
30 seconds
many
to
of the
wrap up.
developments haven't gotten a vote. And I know the NYCHA officials said that there's resident involvement, but often it just goes to the TA president who makes the decisions on behalf of the development. And the resident involvement in the TA structure is varied. And so if that's actually going to be the process, there needs to be investment to make sure that there's actually resident outreach, there's door knocking, there's calls. That requires a lot of work that the tenant associations aren't set up with or have the training to do themselves. So in conclusion, it's really important that we preserve the current public and affordable housing through serious investment. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Ms. Arlene Jeter.
Greetings, Chair Banks and members of the Council Committee on Public Housing. My name is Arlene Jeter. I am a resident of Stapleton, Stapleton Houses in Staten Island. Thank you for the opportunity to submit my testimony today. I urge the council to prioritize public housing investment in this year's budget, putting $1.5 billion towards NYCHA's capital funding. I've lived in Stapleton Houses since 1992, raised my children there. It is the largest NYCHA development in Staten Island with 700 apartments and thousands of residents, and is often listed as the worst development. People who do not live there in the development break the locks in the buildings and the doors and smoke in the hallways, urinate, poop in the stair hall, and threaten, they threaten residents, making them feel unsafe. We had a blackout where the electricity was out for 3 days, and for a couple of months, we had the generators going on and off. They said the reason was because the electrical went out and the wires were old. They needed upgrades years ago. This was especially hard on the disabled and elderly residents who could not keep up their their medicines cold, or the elevators
30 seconds to wrap
working
up.
to go to their appointments, or even breathe with the respirators. I was the vice president of the Tenant Association when the gas was out. And it was out almost for a year. This funding is important so our issues do not escalate further. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony and your advocacy. Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, hello, Chair Banks. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson. First, I am calling for the eradication. I'm calling for the City Council to introduce a bill into the City Council. Start with you, Mr. Chair Banks, to introduce a bill to eradicate the CCOP, the Council of Presidents. Please eradicate CCOP. I just found out that CCOP is ran full of people that are opportunistic, people that used to run for city council that couldn't even get like 5% of the vote in their primary, like Reginald Bowman and Lift Lozano. This committee needs to be eradicated because they're a big part of the reason why these people in NYCHA are getting sold out down the river. I just found out this about the past meeting. I'm surprised that there's nobody in the city council really start calling this stuff out. What's going on here? I'm calling for the eradication of CCOP, nothing but opportunistic people that are hell bent on selling out NYCHA to developers, to Related and all these organizations. Mr. Banks, I know you're down with Mercedes Narcisse. You need to start supporting her for city council because one of the people that is on CCOP is supporting her opponent. You need to call that out. You need to support Mercedes Narcisse. Mercedes, I hope you watch this right now, Mercedes. Your opponent is supported by Barbara McFadden, who's part of CCOP. You need to start calling this stuff out, Mercedes Narcisse. This is the truth. Another thing I need to ask from you is, I hope they didn't apply, that the City Club in New York that's run by Layla Law Glisco gets funding from the City Council for programming. And when it comes to educating clients, educated the members of NYCHA, people that live in NYCHA, about Section 9 and Section 8 and the RAD and PACT and the blueprint and CCOP. Like I said, I'm calling for the eradication of CCOP right now. People need to start bringing this stuff up more at these hearings. I feel bad for the people that was out there 2 weeks ago. You was out there, thanks for supporting RPPH and Layla at the rally just at the morning time. But
30 seconds to wrap up.
I'm calling for the eradication of CCOP. Chris Banks, please support Mercedes. You need to support her. You need to have her call out her opponent about Barbara McFadden, who's the first vice chair of CCOP, that is down for the eradication of NYCHA through RAD, PACT, and the blueprint. You need to call it out, bro. You need to help out Mercedes, man. As a man to man, you need to call out you need to help Mercedes call our opponent about that. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your advocacy. We'll now have Sharon Brown come on up. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Sharon Brown. Before I get started, remember Israel, defend Israel, release the hostages, let Yahweh's people go. Okay, so NYCHA, when they come to the hearing, they are completely unprepared, unaware of what's happening in the building with the money spent and everything. Every question that was asked, they don't know, and this seems to be a way to throw it off for another time so they don't have to deal with it. So they know there's a meeting coming up, and no one has any kind of figures or any kind of data or information. And this is ongoing, and it's just a cycle. They keep doing the same thing over and over. The way they're dealing with the council is the same way they deal with the tenants. They tell them they're going to make the repairs or whatever, that you go into a cycle and nothing ever gets done. So all they have to do to you is keep coming here unprepared, and you yell at them, you tell them what they need to do, and nothing ever gets done. So they, the things that they want to talk about, that they made the repairs, but they say they've made certain repairs, 100 here, 1,000 there, since this time, but they don't have anything, any data to show you. I wonder if they actually handed in anything to show the repairs that they've made thus far. When they make repairs for the leaks in the apartments, what they're doing is improper. If the leak is coming back, that means that they have to change the pipes. So what they're doing now is patching up the wall. They're probably putting a little sealant on the pipe, and then the pipe is rebursting again. They have to purchase new pipes, or at least a portion of pipe. Maybe they screw out or something, they could put them in. They are in a cycle of causing rent arrears by failing to make the repairs. Then they save money.
30 seconds to wrap it up.
They make the tenants pay for an apartment that has not been repaired for many years, and then the tenant winds up either getting evicted or having to pay for living in squalor that the NYCHA is responsible for. It's not fair to the tenants to have to pay the arrears as if they lived in a completely repaired apartment.
Thank you so much for your advocacy and your testimony.
You're welcome. God bless.
Now we will end public testimony, in-person testimony, and we will now go to Zoom testimony. We will now turn to the remote testimony. Once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and the Sergeant of Arms will give you the go-ahead to begin. Please wait for the Sergeant of Arms to announce that you may begin before delivering your testimony.
You may begin.
Gwendolyn Primus.
You may begin.
Gwendolyn Primus. Gwendolyn Primus.
You may begin.
Now we'll move to Jeremy Bonnier.
Time has started.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Jeremy Bonnier. I am an elected constitutional officer sitting on the executive board of the Association of Legal Advocates and Attorneys, United Auto Workers Local 2325. UAW 2325 represents over 3,400 active and retired legal services workers at over 30 nonprofit organizations in the New York City metro area, including the majority of providers participating in the Right to Counsel Universal Access Program. 2325 members are the workers who keep people in their homes, fight for repairs, and keep NYCHA and private landlords accountable to the law by making sure New Yorkers have access to justice in our courts and vital social services in our city. Our members are an essential labor force, but like with NYCHA itself, decades of underfunding has led to untenable conditions. We are facing an attrition and workload crisis. Our salaries and retirement benefits have failed to keep pace with our counterparts in the district attorney's offices and corporation counsel. When our wages stagnate, the services poor and working class New Yorkers receive are degraded. Positions requiring experience go unfilled, leaving those who remain overburdened with rising caseloads. We lose talent and institutional knowledge. It takes experienced advocates to ensure tenants are not evicted over unpaid NYCHA Section 8 portions of the rent that are not their burden to pay. It takes a depth of knowledge with NYCHA regulations to navigate succession in NYCHA units so that family homes can remain family homes after the death of a loved one. Not every licensee holdover is actually that. A lot of these people, or at least some, are entitled to these units. Attempts to meaningfully fill senior positions in the organizations we work for have failed. Our salaries are just too low, and the cost of living in the city is too high.
Thank you. Time's expired.
Thank you for your testimony. Now we'll have Imani Chef El Fararisi.
You may begin.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Amani Sharif Al-Farisi, and I am a delegate from Canada Legal Services Workers United at the Association of Legal Advocates and Attorneys. I would like to speak on the crucial role that case handling paralegals play in assisting NYCHA tenants and Section 8 recipients. When NYCHA tenants are informed of an administrative proceeding and served with charges, many mistakenly believe that a housing court case has been commenced, failing to recognize an administrative proceeding as a possible preventative measure to housing court action. It takes an experienced paralegal to understand the charges, interview tenants, review their files, and effectively advocate on their behalf to settle the proceeding. Paralegals play a key role in preventing these cases from advancing to housing court and preventing eviction from public housing. Furthermore, paralegals may also assist NYCHA tenants and Section 8 recipients to resolve accrued rental arrears balances that threaten their permanent housing. Paralegals knowledgeable of the processes required to secure financial assistance from the Human Resources Administration through a one-shot deal or from a charitable organization are crucial to assist tenants to resolve their balances. In 2025, ALAA has fundamentally changed the terrain of legal services through our organizing. Now over 95% of legal services workers in New York City are UAW 2325 members. In fiscal year 2026, we are asking the council to fully fund legal services so our employers can meet our core bargaining demands. My written testimony will detail these demands. Our members are not immune from the affordability crisis that has hit our city hard. Austerity budgets and legal services hurt our union, and they hurt New Yorkers. Settling fair contracts centered on these demands will provide stability to our members and ensure working class New Yorkers get the absolute best legal representation. They deserve nothing less.
Thank you for your testimony. We're going to take a 3-minute recess. Thank you. Let me just recognize Councilmember Sanchez, who was on via Zoom. Thank you, Councilmember. Now we will proceed with our next virtual testimony, and that's going to be Renee Keith. Renee Keith.
You may begin.
Let's do one more time. Renee Keith. All right, so now we'll move on to Tanisha Grant.
Time.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ms. Grant.
Thank you, Chair Banks, for this very important meeting on public housing. My name is Tanisha Grant. I am the Executive Director of Parent Support in Parents New York and Moms United for Black Lives New York City. I also, in my personal capacity, I am the second vice chair of my community board 12 in Manhattan, but I am here as the Executive Director of Parent Support in Parents New York. We have a lot of parents, Chair, that live in public housing, generations of Black people and brown people who have brought up their families and, others in public housing. This is about upkeep and budget. So we are partners of Residents to Preserve Public Housing, and we stand with them on their demands. We need $3.4 billion in capital funds in NYCHA budget every year. We need $2.9 billion in operation funds for this fiscal year and fiscal years going forward. This is about mismanagement. I am truly, truly disturbed at how these people at the top of NYCHA came here today and were so disrespectful to you and to the committee and to our residents in public housing. This is about people's homes. Public housing has been mismanaged for generations. There is no one other to blame except the people who lead on NYCHA upkeep and on NYCHA management. We do not want RAD and we do not want PACT. We want to keep our Section 9. It is the only deeply affordable housing that low-income people and working class people and working poor people have. We want you to stand on this, Chair. We really appreciate your efforts, but we must do more. We would like to see the whole City Council get behind the Public Housing Committee.
Thank you.
And make sure that
30
we
seconds
have
to wrap
fully
it up.
funded public housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Now we'll move to Beverly McFarland.
Starting time.
Beverly McFarland. Beverly McFarland. All right, now we'll move on to Dana Eldon.
Starting time.
Dana Eldon.
Good afternoon, Chairman Banks. This is Dana Eldon from St. Mary's, also from RPPH. And I'm here again to comment on some of the many issues that residents suffer from at the hands of NYCHA. Today, many spoke about the financial atrocities that follow NYCHA and their endeavors. And as a resident council president and community activist, I have observed some of the spending practices within my own NYCHA development, the spending of thousands of dollars, which could have been spent on purchasing what was needed to fix items within the development. It is deplorable that they spend money as they do, and we have no idea what vendors they are using or the money exactly, the figures that they're spending. This must stop. And they keep saying, well, the resident leaders can and they are knowledgeable. That's a lie. If I want anything, I have to beg for it. Just recently, there was an issue in regard to me asking for the vacancies in my development. the difference between Section 8 and Section 9. I observed 3 new residents moving in under Section 8. However, out of the 87 vacancies that we have, I have seen not one Section 9 tenant move in. What are they doing? What are they doing? Why is no one jumping at them? And why is it that we only get 2 minutes? They sit, the NYCHA comes in there and they sit and they give you crap. They lie to you. And then they can say as much as they want to say, we get 2 minutes. That's not fair. That's not fair at all. And it should be changed.
Do you want an extra minute? I'm going to give you an extra minute.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Not a
Appreciate
problem.
it. There's just too much that is not being spoken of. And NYCHA tends to get away with it. I said, I'm not trying to run after them. I just want the truth. And I want it to be known. There's no way that we can do this without you and those that support these efforts to find out what NYCHA is doing and make them accountable. They need to be accountable. Look how gray I've gotten since I've been dealing with NYCHA. I didn't have this gray before. But thank you, Chairman, for this opportunity. God bless you always.
Thank you for your strong voice and your advocacy. Thank you for your testimony. We will now move to Douglas Covington. Douglas Covington.
You may begin.
We would now like to call up to the testimony table, We the People. And that will conclude okay. You may approach. Thank you. You can have a seat. Yes, thank you. And just, yep. Move a little closer so we can, thank you. You can pull the mic a little closer. Yeah.
Okay.
You may begin.
Hi, I'm here because I'm from Jacob Reese Houses in Manhattan, and they trying to bring the PACT program to us as well. We the people do not want it. We never asked for it. The Tenant Association that claim they work for us, we never agreed to these people. We don't even know who are these people, so we don't even know how they get there into office when we never asked for them. You understand? So a lot of these things that's going on is going on underhandedly. You understand? A lot of I'm gonna say my tenants, because I'm for the people, so a lot of them be scared, to open their door. They send me videos where the PACT people knock on their door, they don't want to open it. And far as when I was listening about the maintenance, it takes actually, when you call, it depends what you're calling for maintenance. You could be waiting 2 weeks to another whole month to actually get some type of repair. You understand? So now, not only that the tenants pay money, they get federal funded housing. So where's the money? Every tenant have a right to know where their money is going and what account. Is it going into the housing account or is it going into their personal account? Where's the money? Where's the money? You got tenants that pay their rent, whether it's getting from public assistance or whether it's coming out their pocket. So with that and federal funding, they could have fixed them buildings up 16 million times. Again, it's like they want money, they asking y'all for money. I'm sitting here listening about all the money they asking for, but yet they not doing that. And as far as PACT abandoned plenty of their buildings in Brooklyn. I'm from Brooklyn, and I moved to Manhattan. It's plenty of buildings in PACT that's abandoned. So how you coming over here and want to take over here when you're abandoned your own? That don't make sense. We don't want PACT, we never asked for PACT, and we have our own. I'm sorry.
30 seconds to wrap it up.
Sorry, can I get 5 more minutes?
No, 30 seconds.
Oh, 30 seconds?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead, ma'am.
Listen, we don't want that. You understand? We the people don't want that. We have our own signatures from every building, and Jacob Reese, and they saying they don't want it. So I think it's underhanded that they trying to have a vote without the tenants. It's a lie. They don't ask the tenants to be on board. It's a lie. You understand? So please, I mean, when I went to the meeting, they tried to put me out because I told them the truth. Like, we didn't ask for this. How y'all just come in to decide this is what y'all want? And here, take it. No, it's no contract between us housing, which is we the people, housing, or PACT stating that we wanted PACT.
Well, thank you for your testimony and your advocacy. Thank you much.
Chairman, Mr. Banks. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
So
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Okay. And you too, everybody.
If we have inadvertently missed anyone that has registered to testify today and has yet to have been heard or called, please use the Zoom to raise your hand function if you have testified remotely, and you will be called in order that your hand has been raised. If you're testifying in person, please come to the dais. If no one, okay, so we see none. I will close this hearing. Thank you to all the members and the administration and the members of the public who have joined us today to discuss this very important topic. This hearing is adjourned.